Dobro jutro. Now we are really going to start. Yes, so dobro jutro, good morning. Welcome to this Policy Lab of the European Urban Knowledge Network, EUKN. My name is Martin Grizel, and this is my colleague Federica Risi. We will be your moderators of today. But of course, we have organized this Policy Lab in close cooperation with our partner in Slovenia, which is the Ministry for the Environment and Spatial Planning. Really very happy to work together with Asha Roval and Tomasz in organizing this policy lab. I'm director of the EUKN. EUKN is a network of member states that work together on urban issues. We support ministries that are responsible for urban matters in the widest sense possible. And we see ourselves as the strategic knowledge partners of those ministries. I'm extremely glad to be here in person in Kranj. I was here before COVID, but I'm really happy to be here in person without my luggage. That's one of the reasons I'm dressed like this. My luggage will arrive hopefully later today. It does not prevent us from having a very interesting meeting with you, an in-person event, and it's the first time indeed since a couple of years that I'm back here in Slovenia and back in Kranj. This topic of today, which is enhancing green spaces in cities, is an extremely important topic. And I refer to COVID, but I think especially after COVID, about all the issues where the new appreciation of green spaces in cities, this topic of what we call also nature-based solutions has become even more important. The issue is that it should be seen in a more integrated way. So it's not just a matter of creating a park in a city, establishing a green roof in a residential area. It should really be part of the integrated approach. And I'm extremely happy that this topic of, let's say, green interventions, nature-based solutions have been put high on the agenda of the Slovenian presidency last year. And we were very happy to work very closely with the ministry. The issue of let's say the relevance of nature inclusive policies have also gained a lot of attention at the European level. But I mentioned nature-based solutions is a jargon term that stands for a lot of projects that are carried out also throughout Europe. And today we will be talking also about some of those projects and what they have established so far. There is a new law in the making, or a new regulation in the making, the Nature Restoration Law, which will be obligatory for member states to comply with. It will have a huge impact, I would say, on the way member states and cities also deal with nature interventions. We will talk about that as well. The issue is that with all this emphasis on green interventions, the European Green Deal, the biodiversity strategy, also the new urban agenda, the new partnerships of the urban agenda that were launched as part of the Ljubljana Agreement adopted under the Slovenian presidency, with a new partnership on greening cities, they all show how this topic has gained also a political momentum. And with that, I really look forward to having an interesting discussion in this hybrid plenary in the morning. In the afternoon, we will have more breakout sessions. But I leave it to my colleague Federica to explain in further detail the program before we give the floor to Bojan Vezilovic from the deputy mayor of this city of Kranj. Federica, for you to explain to the audience the program of today, please.
Thanks, Bart. I would just like to reiterate how glad we are to cooperate with the Ministry of Environment and Spatial Planning of Slovenia in this framework of building institutional capacity for promoting green sustainability transitions, and in a way really elevating the need to use nature restoration as a precondition for climate action in cities. This policy lab is very much a continuation of some of the previous work we conducted with the ministry, in particular is a follow-up to last year Policy Lab that saw us clustering the green actions of the urban agenda for the EU to distill practical messages for policymakers, in particular for ministries for the environment. For today's program, we have a packed agenda, as you can see. During the morning, we will have an hybrid meeting, so the session will be recorded via Zoom, allowing for virtual participations of online speakers. Now, I just want to disclaim that we will be recording the session, and of course, you will be able to see yourself on the screen. So if this is not okay for you, just let us know after the event, and we will make sure that you won't be included in any dissemination material. We will have a plenary with a few institutional introduction, including a welcome by the ministry themselves, also by the city of Kranj, and an opening presentations by our colleagues at ICLEI Europe that have worked very closely with the European Commission, DG Environment and Eurocities to produce guidelines for subnational authorities on how to really implement at the local level the nature restoration law through urban greening plans. After that, we will allow for some questions and answers, of course, and we will start with the roundtable discussions, including different experts. We have here on site Professor Barbara Goldschnick. Apologies for the wrong pronunciation, but it's an honor to have you among us today. And then we will also have two presentations by colleagues based abroad. First from Arnaud Yuc. I also hope I'm pronouncing this right. He's a colleague in an Horizon 2020 project that promotes the co-creation of nature-based solutions in European and Latin American cities. They're a technical agency supporting the municipality, the local authority of Barcelona. And we will also have a presentation by Isabel Fletcher. She's based at Horizon NUA and used to work in the Connecting Nature project, also an Horizon 2020 project. As you can see from the program, we really plan on covering different aspects of green interventions. So from really integration into planning to measuring and assessing, and also financing. And we hope you will enjoy. So after the morning session, there will be a vegetarian lunch provided. We will say goodbye to our international speakers and participants. And then for the afternoon sessions that will only be on site and presential, we won't have any interpretation available, unfortunately, so we will do our best to coordinate. And we plan for a more dynamic and really interactive discussion that will start with 2 site visits facilitated by Tomasz. And after the 2 site visits, we want to pick your brain and really build on your experiences from your different disciplines and walk of professions to once again address the barriers to integrate effectively nature into urban policies and practices, and once again extract recommendations for local policymakers, but also for policymakers at the national level. So this upscaling and outscaling dimension of the debate will be fundamental. After the working group discussion, we will close and say goodbye. So I hope you enjoy. Dobrodošli.
And with that, I'd like to give the floor now to the Deputy Mayor of the city of Kranj, Mr. Bojan Veselinovic. I hope I pronounced your name also correctly. It's an honor to have you with us. And I'll put on my headset because this speech will be in Slovenian. So please go ahead.
tudi mladi podjetniki in seveda v našem lepem mestu, ki zaradi zelenih praks, ki jih uvajamo na vseh področjih, od prometa, gradnje, infrastrukture in obnov stavbe do turizma in digitalizacije, postaja čedalje bolj zeleno, trajnostno, mobilno in pametno mesto. Najprej dovolite in sprejmite opravičilo in pozdrave našega župana Matjaža Rakovca, ki zaradi nepredvidenih, a neodložljivih obveznosti žal ne more biti na današnjem dogodku, vas pa vse skupaj lepo pozdravljam in vam želi uspešno delo na današnjem dogodku, ki ga v luči aktualnih razprav o pomenu dostopne in povezovalne infrastrukture v mestih in urbanih območjih skupaj z EUKN ob podpori Mestne občine Kranj organizira Ministrstvo za okolje in prostor. Kranj je edinstven tudi, ker ima v svojem osrčju naravno znamenitost. Če se ozrete skozi okno, boste iz te stavbe videli kanjon Kokre, ki je drugi najvišji mestni kanjon v Evropi in vse bolj priljubljena točka za oddih in sprostitev. Sprehod po krožni sprehajalni poti, ki je dostopna iz samega mestnega središča, pričara občutek, da si nekje sredi narave, ne pa v srednjeveškem mestu. Želimo ga ohraniti takega, kot je, bomo pa še bolj uredili zelene površine in naravne danosti ob reki ter dostop do njih. Pred 2 letoma smo odprli tudi pot za pešce in kolesarje na Majdičev lok. S tem je Kranj dobil najkrajšo javno povezavo med starim mestom in zelenimi površinami na Savskem otoku. Urejamo tudi naravni rezervat Bobovek. Konec letošnjega leta bomo začeli urejati največji park v mestu na površini 7500 kvadratnih metrov, park doktorja Janeza Blajvajsa. Še letos bo nastal manjši park v mestu, park slovenske himne, na nekoč degradirani površini, tik ob že obstoječem parku Prešernovem gaju. Po mestu ozelenjujemo strehe, imajo osnovna šola Staneta Žagarja v Kranju, tudi center trajnostne mobilnosti, v načrtu so še druge. Zadnja 4 leta smo vzpostavili tudi številne drevorede po mestu in okolici, do konca leta bo tako zasajenih skupaj 700 dreves. Zelena je tudi okolica mesta. Gozdovi pokrivajo več kot polovico območja kranjske občine, več kot 8000 hektarjev. Gorenjska k sreči še sodi med bolj ohranjena območja glede drevesne sestave gozdov in odsotnosti tujerodnih drevesnih vrst. To je treba brez dvoma ohraniti in pri tem so projekti, kot je na primer Alptris, v katerem sodelujemo, nujno potrebni v boju proti vsiljivcem ter škodljivcem in v izzivih, ki jih prinašajo podnebne spremembe. Prostor invazivnim rastlinam krčimo tudi z akcijami v sodelovanju z občani. Zelena okolica mesta, sotočje Save in Kokre s kanjoni, bližnji primestni ravninski gozdovi in okoliško hribovje nudijo prebivalcem Kranja privlačen bivalni ambient. Elemente zelene infrastrukture bo treba vztrajno in sonaravno vgrajevati v ureditvene načrte mesta, kar tudi počnemo. Ob tem spodbujamo še trajnostno mobilnost, saj se dopolnjuje z urejanjem zelenih površin, obenem pa nam bo to kot mestu, ki ga je Evropska komisija izbrala v misijo 100 podnebno nevtralnih mest do leta 2030, pomagalo pri začrtanih ciljih. Sodelovali smo tudi v projektu Tree for Climate, skupaj z Nemčijo in Portugalsko smo prenašali primere dobrih praks na področju podnebne nevtralnosti. Sodelujemo v evropskem projektu 100 inteligentnih mest, tako da nam primerov dobrih praks in izkušenj ne manjka. Širimo in nadgrajujemo sistem izposoje javnih koles, vključili smo se v sistem Gorenjska bike, v katerega je zdaj povezanih 8 gorenjskih občin, kar pomeni, da je po vseh teh možno kolesariti s posojenim kolesom. Z vsem tem bomo nagradili mestne zelene površine, spodbujali k varovanju naravne dediščine, zagotovili zdravo življenjsko okolje meščanov in kakovostne možnosti za prostočasne aktivnosti in rekreacijo ter turizem. Prepričan sem, da bomo danes med razpravo strokovnjakov dobili še marsikatero dobro idejo, kako še bolj učinkovito načrtovati in upravljati zelene površine v urbanem okolju. Ob podpori evropskih kohezijskih sredstev, ki jih napovedujejo za to področje, bo to vsekakor lažje uresničljivo. Hvala za vašo pozornost. Imejte se lepo v Kranju. Welcome in Kran. Hvala.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor, for your interesting introduction. I'm glad that you also mentioned the fact that Kranj is one of those forerunner cities in Europe, one of those 100 cities. I wanted to refer to that project as well, which is a fascinating project where indeed 100 cities committed themselves to becoming fully climate neutral by 2030. I think it's a huge ambition, isn't it? But it's absolutely fascinating. We need those cities to take the lead and to show how in practice indeed cities can become climate neutral. So it's fascinating. I wish you all the best implementing that project. With that, I would like to give the floor. Who is going to start? Tamas or Asha? Asha, right? To give an official welcome to Asha Rogol, Deputy Director General of the Ministry of the Environment and Spatial Planning. Asha, please, the floor is yours.
Lep pozdrav vsem prisotnim. Veseli, da se vidimo na tak način. Zadnji policy labi, ki so nam drugače pomagali tudi pri našem predsedovanju in sodelovanje z EUKN je v zadnjih letih se pokazalo kot zelo uspešno. In veseli me, da vas lahko pozdravim tukaj in pa na internetu v imenu Ministrstva za okolje in prostor. Jaz sicer ne bom pustila besedo kolegu Tomažu, ki vam bo predstavil, kaj vse delamo na Ministrstvu za okolje in prostor za to, da bi dosegali cilje, ki so jih omenjali kolegi iz EUKN in pa jih je tudi zelo lepo predstavil gospod podžupan na primeru mestne občine Kranj, kateri se tudi zelo zahvaljujemo, da nas danes tukaj gosti. Predvsem bi si pa želela poudariti to, da vse stvari, ki jih počnemo na področju ozelenitve mest, grejo v smeri tega, da si želimo zagotoviti večjo kakovost bivanja za naše prebivalce, za lažjo dostopnost do kakovostnih zelenih površin in pa za bolj zdravo življenje v naših mestih. Slovenija se dostikrat prepozna kot podeželska dežela, pa se reče, saj imamo veliko zelenih površin, saj imamo hitro dostopne površine izven mest, pa dostikrat pozabimo na naša strnjena naselja in tukaj imamo še precej za narediti, veliko izzivov nas še čaka, ampak mislim, da v prihodnje tudi s pomočjo evropskih kohezijskih sredstev, ki jih bomo vsaj del usmerjali tudi v to, da se v slovenskih mestih izboljša dostop do zelenih površin, mislim, da bomo prispevali tudi k temu cilju. Zdaj pa še enkrat hvala vsem, ki ste se nam pridružili, upam, da boste z nami ostali cel dan. Agenda, kot ste videli, je zelo natrpana, pa predajam besedo naprej kar Tomažu, da vam predstavi mogoče inštrumente, ki jih na direktoratu razvijamo na tem področju. Hvala.
Aša, hvala lepa, lep pozdrav tudi v mojem imenu. Možda sem zelo vesel, sem danes tukaj. Tega prostora se spomnim še, ko so bili tukaj okrog pravzaprav poštni šalterji in ko sem kot otrok hodil skupaj starši in sem namreč iz tega mesta doma, ko sem pač hodil tukaj po različnih opravkih. In mi je ta transformacija tega prostora, v katerem smo, res zelo, zelo fascinantna. Tako da tudi čestitke kolegom iz mestne občine Kranj Peskovačnica k temu pogumnemu koraku, no, in da se ta hiša danes uporablja na nek drugačen način. Zdaj mislim, že pomladi pravzaprav skupaj s kolegi iz EUKN rečemo o tem, katero temo bi pač naslovili na tem Policy Labu. In takrat so bili zelo pod vtisom pač dogajanja v zadnjih 2 letih in o pomenu, katere zelene površine v mestih igrajo pravzaprav pri izboljšanju oziroma vzdrževanju kakovosti življenja prebivalcev mest. Zdaj v teh 2 letih, ko smo pač bili omejeni, mogoče na bližino svojih domov, je bila zelo poudarjena neka socialna funkcija, katero zelene površine v mestih imajo, kot neka območje, kjer se lahko vseeno družimo, kjer se lahko rekreiramo, in ta, kot je tudi rekla Aša, ta bližina pravzaprav zelenih površin našim domov izrednega pomena. Seveda vedno, kadar govorimo o zelenih površinah, ko govorimo o zelenjevanju mesta, ne, imamo pa v mislih tudi neke dolgoročne trende, neke probleme, ki so pred nami. Zdaj pri tem mislim predvsem na klimatske spremembe in na to vlogo, katero zelene površine v mestih imajo, tudi z tega pravzaprav klimatskega vidika, tudi vlogo, katero imajo za mestni prostor, z morfološkega vidika in tako naprej. Tako da ta tema je bila, se mi zdi, da zelo posrečeno izbrana, tudi da smo letošnje poletje, predvsem v Sloveniji, kakšne težave so pravzaprav imeli v mestih zaradi pač ekstremne vročine in ekstremne suše. Zdaj moja naloga v tej uvodni predstavitvi je mogoče malo tako taka nehvaležna, več ideja je bila, da jaz pač predstavim nek okvir politik. Zdaj večina vas gostov danes tukaj prihaja iz občinske ravni. In pravzaprav včasih je zelo, zelo težko povezovati to neko zelo strateško, zelo splošno, to neko policy ravno potem z nekimi konkretnimi aktivnostmi v prostoru. Jaz veliko delam na tej evropski ravni pripravi javnih politik in vse politike so generalno nekaj, kar je zelo, zelo splošnega. Jaz kot politiko seveda razumem nek nabor namenov, ciljev, načel, zavez in pravil. In te zaveze so pravzaprav zapisane v celo vrsto nekih dokumentov na zelo različnih ravneh. Na globalni ravni, na primer v dokumentih Združenih narodov, v dokumentih OECD, na ravni Evropske unije, v novi Leipziški listini, mogoče v urbani agendi in tako naprej, in seveda na nacionalni ravni v različnih zakonih, in v Sloveniji na področju prostorskega urejanja prostora zakone menjamo zelo, zelo hitro, v strategijah, državnem prostorskem redu. Moj namen danes pravzaprav se je zelo na hitro sprehoditi skozi te ravni in vsem pokazati neko povezavo med nekimi zelo strateškimi, splošnimi zavezami in načeli in nekim udejanjenjem v nekem konkretnem prostoru. So pa, kljub temu so te politike zelo splošne, so zelo pomembne, ker politike seveda pomenijo neke dogovorjene družbene cilje, nek naš skupen javni interes, in zato, ker pač neka načela, neka naša ravnanja, zapišemo neke politike, imamo možnost, da potem temu namenimo določena javna sredstva, lahko temu namenimo neke druge materialne vire, človeške vire in tako naprej. Zdaj se ne bom skozi vse te dokumente sprehodil, bi mogoče rad samo malo osvetlil dva dokumenta, en na ravni Združenih narodov, to je nova urbana agenda. Nova urbana agenda je iz leta 2016 v Kitu. Ta agenda se naslavlja globalna mesta in naslavlja teme, kot so globalna revščina, stanovanjske probleme, slum in tako naprej. Se naslavlja tudi pomen zelenih površin v mestu, pomen ozelenjevanja mest. In dokument zelo jasno izpostavlja pomen trajnostne rabe virov in pa zemljišč, varovanje ekosistemov in pa biotske resurse tudi v mestu. Prepogosto pozabljamo, da tudi mesta so pomembna z vidika ohranjanja biodiverzitete. In naslednji pomen, katerega ta dokument da, oziroma naslednji namen, kateri da urbanemu razvoju ta dokument, je nuja, da z ukrepi na področju urbanega razvoja seveda blažimo vplive podnebnih sprememb, omejujemo probleme tveganj in pa nesreč v mestih. Naslednji dokument, ki se ga bom dotaknil, je nova Leipziška listina. To je dokument, ki so ga zdaj že pred skoraj 2 leti potrdili ministri Evropske unije, pristojni za urbani razvoj. Tisto, kar ta dokument poudarja in kar se meni zelo pomembno, je ta vidik pravičnosti. A ne? Dokument zelo jasno pove, da je razvoj kakovostnih mestnih okolij za vse, ki vključuje tudi vstop do zelenih in rekreacijskih površin, nujen. Kadar govorimo o dostopnosti do zelenih površin v mestih, ne govorimo samo o bližini teh površin, govorimo tudi o njihovi opremljenosti, kakovosti, tudi o cenovne dostopnosti. Te površine morajo biti tudi brezplačno, vsaj nekatere na voljo prebivalcem, lahko v teh površin se rekreirajo, zadovoljijo svoje socialne in druge potrebe. Jaz sem spustil na našo nacionalno raven. Seveda krovni zakon na tem področju je zakon o urejanju prostora, ta trenutek je v veljavi zakon o urejanju prostora 3.0, ne. Ne vem, ali bo še kakšen, ne. Ta dokument seveda definira namene in pa cilje urejanja prostora. Na tej bolj strateški ravni sta potem pomembna še dva dokumenta oziroma več njih, no, eno je strategija prostorskega razvoja Slovenije, tudi ne veljavi od leta 2004, že kar nekaj časa se trudimo za pripravo nove strategije, ki je še vedno v obliki predloga. Ta hip je, samo kot informacijo podam, že drugič v medresorski obravnavi in še vedno čakamo, da gre dokument na vlado. In tretji tip dokumenta je državni prostorski red, ki pa ni en sam dokument, ampak je pravzaprav skupek večjih dokumentov, uredb in pa pravil in pa priporočil za urejanje prostora. Zdaj se z zakonom ne bom preveč ukvarjal, ker mislim, da niti ni potrebe. Bom preskočil na cilj prostorskega razvoja, kot so definirani v strategiji prostorskega razvoja. Tam je ciljev 5. In cilji so pravzaprav med sabo zelo različni. Nekateri so zelo jasno, tudi že poimensko povezani z vsebino današnjega dogodka. Zdaj, cilji so vzpostaviti ustrezne razmere za prehod v podnebno nevtralno družbo, cilje postavljene na področju mednarodne konkurenčnosti mest, zagotavljanje kakovosti življenja v mestih in urbanih okoljih, cilje ukrepiti prostorsko identiteto in pa izboljšati odpornost in pa prilagodljivost prostora na spremembe. Jaz se dotaknil na kratko samo 2 ciljev, ki mogoče na prvi pogled niso tako zelo povezana s tem, o čemer se danes pogovarjamo. To je cilj doseči mednarodno konkurenčnost slovenskih mest. Ta cilj govori o tem, da se moramo narediti slovenska mesta privlačna, tako privlačna, da lahko privabimo na primer v naša mesta različne evropske institucije, predstavništva mednarodnih podjetij in tako naprej. Da to lahko naredimo, seveda mora biti mesta dobro opremljena. Ni pomembna samo dostopnost mest v smislu prometne dostopnosti, letalskih povezav, ni pomembna samo opremljenost mest, recimo z mednarodnimi šolami, vrtci, z nekimi tudi kulturnimi dogodki, ki so ne samo v slovenskem jeziku, ampak imajo tudi kakovost mest. Drugi so imeli tudi seveda kakovostne zelene površine v mestu, ker poleg nekih podjetij in kapitala za mesta morajo tudi pritegniti ljudi, ki bodo sem prišli in ki bodo tudi pravzaprav sodelovali pri razvoju teh mest. In pa 5. cilj, ki govori o izboljšanju odpornosti in pa prilagodljivosti prostora. Ta cilj ni samo o nekih fizičnih prilagoditvah prostora, ampak je predvsem tudi cilj, ki govori o tem, da moramo opolnomočiti sami sebe, da moramo delati na tem tako imenovanem capacity buildingu vseh struktur v upravi, nevladnih organizacij in tako naprej. In ta današnji dogodek je tudi dogodek, ki je v luči tega, da se pravzaprav vsi skupaj na eni strani naučimo mogoče nekaj novega, v drugi strani, da krepimo nek dialog med različnimi ravni upravljanja, med državo, občinami, regijami in tako naprej. Mogoče bomo še zelo hitro skozi naslednje slajde. Zdaj strategija se tudi obravnava oziroma predlaga nek koncept prostorskega razvoja in eden od 4 elementov tega koncepta je zelena infrastruktura oziroma zeleni sistem. Ta infrastruktura je definirana na nacionalni ravni, ta zelena infrastruktura se bo podrobneje definirana oziroma opredeljena v regionalnih prostorskih planih in strategija že ima neke zasnove tega, na kakšen način lahko se lahko pri pripravi regionalnih planov lotimo zasnove te zelene infrastrukture in se ta infrastruktura na nacionalni in pa regionalni ravni je močno povezana z zelenim sistemom mest. To je koncept, ki je v našem prostorskem načrtovanju znan. Na teh dve sliki, ki sta prikazane na zaslonu, sta sliki iz iz ljubljanskega prostorskega plana, na levi strani je strateška karta v bistvu zelenega sistema v mestih in na desni strani izsek iz prostorskega načrta občine, kjer so glede na tudi na strateška izhodišča definirane potem zelene površine kot namenska raba prostora. Sedaj pa niso vse površine, katere so v mestih zelene, nujno samo na pravi namenski rabi. Na kratko sem dotaknil še državnega prostorskega reda. Državni prostorski red sestavlja neke splošne usmeritve in pa priporočila za urejanje prostora ter nekatere osnovne pa bolj podrobna pravila za prostorsko načrtovanje. V zadnjih 2-3 letih je nastalo kar nekaj zelo zanimivih in pomembnih priročnikov. Nekateri od njih imamo danes tukaj s sabo in si jih lahko vzamete s seboj in jih upravljate pri svojem delu. Pripravljanje priročnikov za zelenih sistemov v mestih in naseljih, priročnik o regulacijskih elementih, o mirujočem prometu v naseljih, priročnik za načrtovanje organizacijo gradbenih parcel stavb, oziritev streh in vertikalnih površin, potem o javnih odprtih gradbenih površinah in pa odlok o urejenosti naselij in pa krajine. Zdaj se bomo mogoče samo sprehodil skozi nekatere od njih. Naslovno je pač primer iz priročnika o zelenih sistemih v mestih in pa naseljih. Ta priročnik zelo jasno definira in opredeli, kakšen pomen zelen sistem, zelene površine v mestih imajo, podaja neka priporočila za načrtovanje, govori o tipologiji zelenih površin. In tudi, kot vidite na desni shemi, pravzaprav že podaja neke priporočene, v tem primeru minimalne delež zelenih površin, katere naj bi mesta seveda vključevala. Naslednji priročnik je priročnik o javnih odprtih grajenih površinah. Tudi ta priročnik se definira fenomenologijo oziroma opredeli, katere te javno odprte grajene površine so, podaja nekaj pravil in priporočila za načrtovanje omrežja odprtih grajenih površin in priporočila tudi za izvedbeno raven. Zdaj, kot javno odprte grajene površine seveda opredelimo tako ulice, trge, kot tudi nekatere druge javne površine. In tukaj bi rad poudaril to, da v 17. stoletju so se načrtovala po meri avtomobila. Danes seveda vemo, da mesta morajo iti v neko drugo smer, na področju mobilnosti se dogaja revolucija, ki ni samo ta revolucija, da menjavamo pogonske agregate v avtomobilu, s tega smo zgradili na električnega, ampak je revolucija v smislu, da dejansko prihaja do sprememb mobilnostnih navad. Velik poudarek v mestu seveda je na teh bolj trajnostnih načinih mobilnosti, na kolesarjenju, na pešpoteh. Uveljavlja se nov koncept mesta, to je pač mesto kratkih razdalj, 15-minutno mesto. In ko bomo, jaz verjamem, da bomo pravzaprav implementirali tovrstne koncepte, bomo seveda ugotovili, da imamo v mestih precej odvečnih površin, katere so danes namenjene avtomobilom. Ali so to ceste, ali so to tudi območje za mirujoči promet. In vse te površine predstavlja izjemen potencial tudi za ozelenjevanje mest. In mogoče zadnji priročnik, s katerega se bom sprehodil, je pač priročnik o načrtovanju in organizaciji gradbene parcele stavbe. Ta seveda opredeljuje, kaj gradbena parcela je, opredeljuje njeno organizacijo, podaja nekatere usmeritve in tudi tisto, kar se meni zdi zelo zanimivo, pravzaprav tudi se definira neke deleže rab znotraj teh posameznih parcel. Recimo opredeljuje, kakšen delež parcele, v nekem stanovanjskem območju, pa v nekem nakupovalnem središču ne bi bil namenjen zelenim površinam, kakšen namenjen prometu in kakšen delež je namenjen stavbam. To so priporočila. Tisto, kar je naša velika želja, seveda je, da bi ta priporočila prišla v prakso. In tudi temu, zaradi tega pač načrtujemo takšne dogodke, ki želimo govoriti o pomenu drugačnega načrtovanja mest za kakovostna mesta, v katerih si vsi pravzaprav želimo živeti. Hvala.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Well, thank you so much, Tomasz, for really breaking down such a complex policy context. You pinpointed some very key agenda milestone spanning from the international level to the European, to the national, and to the very local one, which reflects in a way the global nature of challenges cities face, especially in relation to ecosystem restoration, but also the need for a multi-level governance approach. And with these key words, I would like to open the virtual floor and welcome our colleagues from ICLEI Europe to present the implication for subnational authorities of the upcoming nature restoration law and the guidance for cities regarding the urban greening plans. So Shreya, the floor is yours.
Hi, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, so I will shortly share my screen with you. Just a bit of 1 second. Okay. So, do you see it?
Yes, all fine.
Yes.
You wouldn't, yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
All right, so good morning, everyone, and thank you
Wait,
so
Shreya,
much.
1 second.
Yes.
Can you, yeah, we need your presenter view. Otherwise, we can see your notes.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah.
Yes. Good.
Perfect. Do you also see me looking at you, because two of my cameras are on? But in any case, without further ado, first of all, thank you for having me here, and good morning to everybody present. I will first of all like to thank you all for the very interesting presentation so far, and also to say that adding to the one extra piece to the mosaic that Thomas was sharing before is this nature restoration law, which is upcoming. And for that, we have prepared a guidance, or like, let's say we will talk about some guidance that the cities can have in regards to the implementations and what implications does it have. So my contribution today will focus on the implications, meaning both local and regional governments as well as authorities, and how that will impact or how they will be impacted by the nature restoration law. The insights that I will present today are based on the pertinent policy brief that we have just published recently, which was created by the Horizon 2020 project Network Nature. We did consultations and semi-structured interviews with cities such as Umeå, Belgrade, Cascais, Malmö, A Coruña, and also the Hungarian Ministry of Agriculture. In addition to the guidance for targeted actions, the brief focuses on governance, policy coherence, stakeholder engagement, capacity building, and of course, financing and financing levers that can and must be utilized if the nature restoration law is to be a success. So just so you see here what the direct and indirect stipulations there might be for the local and regional authorities, specifically looking at the urban greening targets. Here we see that there is a division between this no net loss of urban green spaces in every European city, town, and suburb by 2030, but also looking at the net gain of urban green spaces in existing and new building stocks and infrastructure development, where we also talk about some percentages in terms of increase in total national area. So of course it comes from a more national perspective, but then also looking at the 10% tree canopy, which goes into each city, each European city, town, and suburb by 2050. And also one indirect stipulation would then be for the cities to be part of the nature restoration plans, where of course there will be a need for identification and quantification of the restoration areas, the status quo, the planned measures, and also the finance needs. And apart from that, there will also be a need for cities to get engaged with the governance and engagement mechanisms that exist or might need to be brought into force for implementation of the nature restoration law. So what we have done here in our work is to look at the actions to prioritize. And here we have looked, of course, looking at the urban ecosystems that, of course, consist of cities and the surroundings. The socio-ecological systems where most people live are mostly completely, or well, almost completely artificial, but they include in different proportions all other types of ecosystems, no? So forests, lakes, agriculture areas, but also in itself is comprising of the urban ecosystem, so to say. And these are very strongly influenced by human activities, as we all know. So restoring these degraded or destroyed ecosystems can take different forms, of course, and through actively implanting or removing pressures so that the nature can recover either on its own or through support by renaturation, which involves design and management of new ecosystems, such as artificial wetlands or new forests. And in that regard, of course, some guiding principles would be to build on what is already there, because it's not always possible or even desirable to return an ecosystem to its original state. So in cities, the ecosystem restoration also takes the form of nature-based solutions, as we heard before, is kind of the jargon term that is being used quite a bit and through different projects, of course. Which involve the design and management of new ecosystems, as we said before, which could range from as well smaller ones such as pocket parks and urban gardens and wetlands and new forests. Here we can also see that, of course, letting nature take its course is one way of determining how the cities can look into it. So you can see on the slide here, this wild grown meadow, for instance, where there is less manicuring needed. But on the other hand, you can also think about biodiversity positive designing management so that you adjust mooring practices to maintain certain habitats while also recreating diversity of natural systems. And the third part is, of course, the creation of new semi-natural ecosystems and habitats, where I was talking about the urban gardens or pocket parks, or also biodiverse green roofs can lead to certain ecological corridors within a city context. And then talking about what the needs could be here. So of course, there is definitely a need for cities to have like some guidance and support on how to prioritize these actions based on physical geographies, and how to address trade-offs among the different benefits for climate biodiversity in society. And in that regard, another very interesting point is about this technical support system, which talks in terms of how the cities, but also the national governments will be having one-to-one support for municipalities on good practices, technical expertise on habitat, species, ecological networks, but also preparation of the ecological restoration plans. And with the new wave of restoration, so to say, of all building stocks, it provides like good opportunities for expanding the green spaces on roofs and walls, particularly supported by regulatory frameworks, making a ratio of the green spaces obligatory for new and renovated buildings. The nature restoration law also puts a strong emphasis on the policy coherence of related EU directives, such as the Water Framework Directive, the Bird and Habitats Directive, the Invasive Alien Species Regulation, etc. The coherence or convergence should also translate to national. There is mentioning of an integration of ecosystem restoration measures with member states' integrated energy and climate plans, and with existing designed or designated renewable go-to areas. However, a supporting regulatory mechanism is also needed at local and regional levels to anchor the mandatory character of action. So it's definitely a trickle-down effect that needs to be taken into account when making sure that these laws are easily translated on a local level as well. Depending on the degree of authority conferred to local and regional authorities by national governments, the former have access then to instruments for integrated urban and territorial development and planning, as well as land use planning, regulation and developmental control, such as, of course, zoning and ecological compensation areas. But due to high competition over land use in this city, which could be in terms of housing or mobility and other sectoral interests that might lay, there might be the green spaces often lose out in that area sometimes. So in the planning hierarchy, local and regional authorities should therefore make sure that the green infrastructure plans or urban greening plans have the same or even more weight, so to say, as other planning instruments. And better integration of environmental aspects in building codes should be steered by higher level policy requirements. Existing planning instruments such as codes for public and private green spaces, regulations for blue and green areas, in combination with new building development, zoning or protected areas, should be reviewed to assess broader application and improved enforcement. So, of course, ecosystem restoration cannot be addressed in silos, and thereby we definitely need stakeholder collaboration beyond the usual suspects to create impact at a scale. This includes reaching out beyond state actors and inviting stakeholders to the table that so far have not formed part of ecosystem or nature conservation sphere. And this also definitely includes water managers, farmers, local and regional authorities, but also private landowners. It will be the responsibility of national actors to put together the national restoration plan, as I was talking about before, with stakeholder input, and then continue to report on monitoring with regards to the targets that relate to different ecosystems. This means a huge transition in the way the national officials are working is needed. The vast majority of national actors have neither the expertise nor the resources or even established mechanisms for mobilizing stakeholders around the national restoration plans, development and planning processes. Of course, there exist some mechanisms which can be reused or refurbished to support this, this process as well, but there's a need for more support in that regard. And in addition to that, there are legal obstacles to implementing actions on private lands that are identified as priority areas for ecosystem restoration measures. Procedures for identifying and registering property regimes are lengthy and could postpone thereby this urgent action even further, given that the consent of landowners is definitely needed prior to such interventions. And thus the case should be made that these interventions are in the public interest, given full priority, and must have regulatory backing. And as Federica was already mentioning, this multi-level governance approach, we also call it the whole of government approach, where different governance levels come together to play a strong role and mandate also the local and regional authorities in the formalization of the government structures and processes. So lastly, one of the last main topics would be about financing ecosystem restoration. I would not go into much detail, but just saying that the law estimates that the overall cost of it would amount to 154 billion, which include restoration efforts, purchasing land, compensation measures, and administrative efforts or costs for member states. This should be noted that available spending for biodiversity include restoration under the current 2021-2027 multi-annual financial framework, which amounts to around 100 billion euros. I would then, in that regard, I just want to highlight the importance of capacity building as part of the technical support system, and would like to then talk about Cities with Nature, which is one of these bodies or capacity building programs that can be used not only on a city level, but also on a regional level to support the capacity that is needed by the use of certain tools and resources towards showing the commitments and the actions that they're doing on the ground and in the cities. Thank you so much. And I would stop here now.
Thank you so much, Shreya, for such an insightful presentation. We will have time for questions. I'm sure the audience will have many, but first I would like to open the floor for Anna Bruin, and we will take questions at the end.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Shreya. And now I will share my screen. And you see it okay?
Yes, all good.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you again for having us both here. It's a pleasure to be with you virtually. My name is Anna Bruin. I'm with ICLEI Europe. I'm an officer in the Sustainable Resources, Climate and Resilience team. And I'm happy to be here representing ICLEI and Network Nature and just speaking a bit about urban greening plans and why urban greening plans. Why are we here as Network Nature talking about this opportunity? Network Nature is an online platform to gather resources, projects, and best practices for the nature-based solutions community. And I know we're talking about that as a buzzword, or blue and green infrastructure are also terms that are being used, but basically safeguarding and increasing biodiversity in urban greening space. And so, you know, we have many resources available already on the Network Nature platform that is open to everyone to join. You can submit your work and your examples or add to the calendar of events like today. This Policy Lab is also there on Network Nature. So I'm here talking about urban greening plans within that framework of it's one way to enhance nature-based solutions and biodiversity. It's a way for cities to align with the Nature Restoration Law and the Biodiversity Strategy 2030. So I'll just take a few minutes to describe how were the urban greening plans, guidance, toolkit, and platform developed, what is in it, and how cities can use it. So ICLEI has been working on this with our partners at EuroCities since about 2021, and we worked with a series of consultations, both online surveys and also online workshops, and we developed the input from stakeholders, which included over 100 municipalities. 40 responded with the city consultation. Additionally, ICLEI worked on a position paper about urban greening plans with the German government. And so we had this series of online consultations, workshops, and surveys going into also the details of what, talking with cities of how could urban greening plans bring nature back into the cities, what should be the process of an urban greening plan, what should be in it, what are key components that are important and critical, and what are urban greening plans not. And so then we took this feedback with our partners at EuroCities and with DG Environment. And the result is this 10-step planning process that's divided into 3 phases with 6 milestones. Very much the cornerstone of it is co-creation. And if any of you in the audience are familiar with the SUMP process, it's very much based on kind of a similar framework for planning. The idea, however, is not that it's an entirely new planning process that every city must do, but that it is a framework for bringing together the work already happening in climate adaptation plans or in green infrastructure planning, and so that cities could enter at any of these stages, or if it's a very new concept in a city, that cities go through the whole process 1 through 10. So, and along with this guidance document that has been drafted and should be available online this week, we're anticipating it any moment. And there's also an urban greening plan toolkit to support cities in the implementation of this planning process, or the different phases of the planning process. Each step, each phase has a few recommended tools that range from EU level data sources to citizen-led initiatives, and each tool then includes how to use it and also an alternative. So I'll just share a few examples of what is in the guidance and in the toolkit. So in the first phase is the preparation phase, where we have step 1, secure a long-term political commitment. This is something that will be going on for a while. Establish a working structure and a co-creation process. So identifying stakeholders that will be guiding this process at the local level. And that's the milestone 1, is the co-creation process. And so in the toolkit, there's a tool that has been developed through the Clever Cities program. In a nutshell, and this is a little bit what you see in the toolkit when it is live and published. It's a 2-part guide for identifying and mapping what stakeholders to engage, what tools and templates can you use to engage them at different steps along the process. So it's not just co-creation isn't just something you do once, but you bring it in each step. And so this tool helps you or shows you some examples of how that can be done. Phase 2 is action planning, where then you start developing long-term vision and goals. And maybe your city already has long-term vision and goals, so then that's what you utilize. Then there's analysis. This is a very critical part of the urban greening plan, is the analysis of the current state of nature and biodiversity. And perhaps in cities this has been done. Parts of it haven't been done. You've got a robust invasive species list, but maybe you don't have anything on water quality. So there's an opportunity then to fill in the gaps where maybe you've been wanting to get some more information or more data and engage more people around a topic. Then based on that, setting indicators and targets for the plan, identifying what the priorities are, and then also really critical to the urban greening plan process is this communication strategy. So then, okay, you have a plan, but if nobody knows about it and can't engage with it and they don't know where to find it, how mainstream can it be? So that's why the communication strategy is also seen as a milestone and as a core piece for the urban greening plan process. And so I mentioned this step 5 as a critical piece for urban greening. And so maybe some of you are familiar with Copernicus, the land monitoring service that provides satellite data. And you can look, there's also a new street tree layer, which as part of the restoration law, in increasing street tree canopy is a critical piece. So this tool can also be helpful there. And then indicators and targets. Some of you may also be very familiar with the City Biodiversity Index, which is also known as the Singapore Biodiversity Index. And so this includes indicators such as the change in number of bird species or percentage of invasive alien species. And this allows you to conduct kind of a baseline, or this allows you to conduct a baseline scoring across 28 indicators that measure native biodiversity and ecosystem services. So you create a city profile and then can assess and measure where you are and then look at it over time. It takes, as we know, takes time to see these changes. So then where in 3 years, what has changed, what is different. And then we have the last stage, phase 3 is implementation and monitoring, last stage, but ever ongoing, where you establish a monitoring and reporting and evaluation system and adopt and publish and implement the plan. And just a point here is, it's in the whole urban greening plan process is supposed to be iterative and adaptive. And so I've presented it in this series of steps 1 through 10, but depending on where your city is, the tools can be used where you need them and when you need them. And so to support in step 9, a tool example is the Connecting Nature Reflexive Monitoring Guidebook. This comes from the Connecting Nature project. So it's a step-by-step guide that helps you be proactive in addressing challenges as they arrive instead of waiting till kind of the end of the intervention. But what can you do? How can you respond to challenges and adapt to changing circumstances? Because we know projects change depending on stakeholders, depending on nature. And so how can we be as adaptive and responsive in a timely manner? And this is a possible tool to help there. So just to say, this work is new for some cities, but very old for other cities. And so the urban greening plan process attempts to be available to support cities where they are, whether it's new or whether it's old hat, as they say, and to build on what is happening in a city where it's happening. So it's intended not to be an extra burden or an extra planning process, but to bring together where is urban greening within the existing city structure, which plans is it in? Is it in a master plan? And then an opportunity to bring the goals and visions that exist together, identify gaps, and then to enhance and increase it so that we can, so that cities can work towards these goals and these ideas and targets that are being set, like in the nature restoration law or in the biodiversity strategy, that calls for increasing urban greening space by 3%, that it calls for increasing tree canopy cover. And then in the biodiversity strategy that calls for cities over 20,000 to have an urban greening plan in place. So that's all. Thank you very much for your time. And I look forward to further discussion.
Yes, thank you very much, Anna and Shreya, for these two really interesting presentations. Also looking at the time, I would like to open now the floor for any questions from here, from the audience here on site in Cannes. Is there any one of you who would like to ask a question, either to Shreya or to Anna? Or do you want me to be your icebreaker? In that case, I will start. Okay, I see we have a question from also to the for you, Anna and Shreya, from Tamas from the Slovenian Ministry. Please go ahead.
Namen teh načrtov za ozelenjevanje mesta je odličen. Mislim, da potrebujemo pač neke tovrstne procese, katerih seveda pridemo do nekih novih rešitev, pa se dogovorimo, na kakšen način bomo mesta pravzaprav predrugačali. Ampak tisto, kar pa se meni postavlja kot vprašanje, kot nekomu, ki se ukvarja tudi pač malo bolj doma v svojem načrtovanju, kakšna pravzaprav je povezava med temi novimi načrti in procesom prostorskega načrtovanja, ker zelo velik del teh korakov je vgrajenih v ta načrtovalski proces. Zato, kar meni se skrbi, je to, da v vsakem takem nekem novem dokumentu, ki ga uvajamo, neki novi obvezi, pravzaprav uvajamo nek dodaten usporeden mehanizem, ki potem se pa na koncu zelo težko pravzaprav implementira v praksi, zato ker seveda v realnosti je pa načrtovanje mest tisto, ki seveda začrta neke konture mesta, ki začrta in ki ve, katere površine so tiste, katere se bodo na ta način urejale. Tukaj mogoče me je zanimalo, pokazali ste v bistvu primere, ali pa saj so slike iz, mislim, da Esna in pa iz Edinburga, kako v teh mestih poteka ta komunikacija med tema dvema procesoma.
So with the
So
urban greening plan process, this is
really
brand new and just being published this week. And we are in conversations with a few cities of, okay, this is great, this is how you do it, but what does that really look like, right? Which is kind of what you're talking about. And what we learned from the consultation process is, it looks like, as you said, very similar to a traditional urban planning process. But the idea is that if a city needs that, based on where they are and working with urban greening, they could do that. You could create an urban planning process around urban greening, or it might be that this infrastructure planning exists in other plans, and how can you pull those together and in one place, whether it's in one document, to highlight what is already happening in your city, and then maybe to say, okay, there's an opportunity for more biodiversity in this project, or, oh, we haven't been focusing on this target that we want to focus on. So in terms of exactly how that is happening and how the different pieces will be pulled together, that's kind of next step in what we're looking at right now.
Thank you, Tamas, for this interesting question, I must say, but also for you, Anna, for the answer. I would like to give the opportunity also to others here on site to ask any other questions. Is there a question here? Otherwise, I do have a question. Let me ask a question to you, Shreya. You referred to this, what you call this whole of governance approach, right? And in EU policy jargon, it's multi-level governance, of course. Well, Tamas, in his presentation, he also presented all the wonderful documents, the new Leipzig Charter, the urban agenda, new urban agenda, all the other documents. Even, I would say, he didn't mention it, but also the Ljubljana Agreement, they all reiterate the importance of multi-level governance. Now, the question is that in reality, in practice, implementing policies, this is so difficult. And there are indeed often also obstacles to actually put this multi-level governance in action. Can you give us a few examples, perhaps, Shreya? It might be a difficult question, but try, I would say. Can you give us a few concrete examples of where this multi-level governance concept does not really work? And then the question, of course, is how to deal with it, how to make it happen. Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's a very important and relevant question, something that we've been dealing with since a really long time, how to ensure multi-level governance and this whole of government approach and so on. But the thing is, like, one example, not necessarily from practice, but just in terms of what was actually a discussion point that came in talking to one of the cities some time ago was, how would it be to have certain green agents, as she called it, to put into certain departments which need to have some, let's say, agenda which aligns in different tiers of governments, no? So to have these green agents to be having a function which goes beyond local, regional, and national, but kind of transgressing these, let's say, our policy or, well, governance boundaries, so to say, to just have this kind of approach would be an ideal situation. But of course, we know that doesn't necessarily exist, so to say. But definitely something which talks about, well, at least in the nature restoration law, there's a talk about like how there's a need for consultation when the national restoration plans are being developed. The regions and local authorities should definitely be consulted and asked for their own contributions, which would then help them to make sure that the national restoration plans are in line with the local needs. So, you know, this like more national, more global also needs to come to a very concrete local action driven plans that they should create in the end. And then, of course, this idea of multi-level governance, but also the implication of having the multi-level governance, which is basically ensuring that that the information flow and also the actions done are monitored not only on the ground level, but also taken up then on the national, but also global level to meet the ambitions that are there. I hope I tried to answer it well.
Yes, I think so. I didn't hear any concrete obstacles where this system actually hampers. But perhaps let me ask you a follow-up question, and perhaps Anna can also join in, because I'm also interested not only in the role of the local level, because obviously, I mean, these plans need to be implemented in cities, in regions. I mean, that's quite obvious, but also the role of the national level. So what is the, let's say, the added value of the involvement of the national level in these perspectives? And I think that Anna might also have some interesting reflections in that regard. So could you elaborate a bit on the role of the national level in implementing all these policies that you just presented?
Yeah, and this is something
Shreya,
that
will you start, Shreya, and then
Anna? Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Shreya. Yeah.
Shreya, you first, and then Anna.
Okay, perfect. Let's do it like that. Definitely, like I definitely think that the role of national governments is really big. It's actually so important that, because of course, like we have this tendency of forgetting that the regions and the cities are responding to the national policies. No, in the end, because they're national plans, there are national objectives that are in place, and also well, let's say the differences in how the governance works on a national scale is very different from the European umbrella, let's say, of policies and plans that are put in place from a European perspective, such as EU biodiversity strategy and so on. And then, of course, these national responses with the NBSAPs, for instance, goes from the nation states, right? So, of course, it's very important that these national level government or national governments are also in close collaboration with the city and the regional governments, because they can kind of feed into each other. And talking especially about ecosystem restoration, it's something that does not see boundaries, right? Like it's not something that can be well, elicited only to a certain specific boundary of a nation state or like a city or a region. So we have to have this collaboration, and this coming back again to this whole of government or multi-level approach. No, so to say that, of course, the nation has such a big role to play, because then they are the ones who have the, well, let's say who are spearheading, so to say, the actions on a well, from the European level. So they have to be in close collaboration with the European, but also on the global level to present the outcome. So definitely, I see that the role of nation states is quite big. Yeah.
I think we also.
Okay, thank you, Shreya.
I think we also.
Yes, Anna, please.
I think we also see it specifically when it comes to project implementation, right? And we're talking also about funding. And so there's local funding available and you have your plans in place, but then to have an enabling environment from the national level that provides also access to funds, or whether it's, or as Shreya was mentioning, you know, more weight on ecosystem services or restoration or urban greening or biodiversity and nature-based solutions, so that when you're doing infrastructure project planning, you know, there's also an enabling mechanism for the nature-based solutions or for the green projects, so that they become at equal footing or even maybe a little bit stronger footing based on the national policy landscape as well as European policy landscape and the vision and goals for the nation and for the city. So I think on the project level and for funding, it's also really important to have the priorities aligned so that there is a conversation taking place between local and national, and that there can be it's not just across ecosystems, but also across political systems and people systems, right? And if you can have that good working environment, then you can realize more benefits. Because just as Shreya was also saying, when we're talking about ecosystem services or nature-based solutions, they go across these boundaries. So to have scaling funding mechanisms and enabling policy at both the local, regional, and national level allows for more collaboration and for broader projects with higher impact.
Yes, thank you both for your answers. We have some workshop sessions here in the afternoon with cities, but also with the National Ministry here in Slovenia. So we'll continue the discussion. I'm just looking at the room here, at the audience. Are there any other urgent questions? If not, we'll continue with our program. And actually, we are a bit behind schedule. Shall we take a short break now? A 10-minute coffee break, and then continue with Barbara? Yes? Okay. So, online guests, thank you for your contribution. We'll take a 10-minute break now, and then we'll resume with the here in-person presentation, followed by an online presentation from Barcelona, and then later on also from Ireland. So take a short break, and then we'll see you soon later. Thank you. Yes, hello. Could you please take your seats? Then we can resume our policy lab, actually. And I'm delighted to give the floor to you, to Barbara Gorsny. No, I'll try to. I was on the right way. Golinchik, Marušić.
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. I managed. And now the easy part, Head of Research at the Urban Planning Institute here in Slovenia. We know each other already for a while, but it's really interesting to listen to her about a topic that's very important to you, the integrating nature into strategic urban planning. And with that, Barbara, I would like to give you the floor to give her first presentation. After that, we'll continue with a few other. We have some questions, some time for questions, and then we'll continue with a online presentation from our colleagues in Barcelona. But first, Barbara, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Pozdravljeni in najprej hvala lepa za povabilo. Torej, jaz sem Barbara Goličnik-Marušič in prihajam z Urbanističnega inštituta Republike Slovenije, kjer se zdaj že zadnjih nekaj let ukvarjam s tematiko na naravi temelječih rešitev, torej nature-based solutions, in njihovo vlogo oziroma povezovanjem s prostorskim načrtovanjem. Današnja predstavitev ima naslov Vključevanje narave v urbanistično načrtovanje na strateški ravni in pod vprašanje, zakaj so zelena mesta boljša mesta. Najprej, predno se spustimo v nadaljnjo predstavitev, bi samo omenila, da smo vsi res v zadnjih vsaj 10 let, če ne že več, ves čas izpostavljeni nekim terminom narava, zeleno, eko in tako naprej. In to vse skupaj vežemo na neko vzdržnost in trajnostnost in sonaravnost. Tako da bi želela poudariti, da včasih ti izrazi nastopajo kot sopomenke, včasih pa seveda tudi ne. In bomo pogledali, kaj so to na naravi temelječe rešitve, najprej skozi to, kako so definirane strani Evropske komisije. Namreč tudi mnogo projektov, na katere so se sklicevali tudi tisti, ki so imeli predstavitve pred nami, financira Evropska komisija in je v tem okviru pač dobro poznati njihovo razumevanje stvari in seveda za nas kot prostorske načrtovalce, če se postavim sedaj v vlogo prostorskega načrtovalca, pa je pomembno, kako to prenašati v načrtovalsko prakso, kje najti povezave, kje najti vzvode. Med drugim bo moja predstavitev temeljila tudi na nekaterih izsledkih študije, ki smo jo naredili za Ministrstvo za okolje in prostor, je objavljeno tudi na njihovih spletnih straneh, končali smo jo pa lansko leto. Torej, na naravi temelječe rešitve so rešitve, ki temeljijo na naravnih procesih. So z njimi podprte ali pa jih posnemajo. In rešujejo ključne aktualne družbene izzive ter so stroškovno učinkovite in krepijo odpornost prostora. O vseh teh terminih, vsebinah smo pravzaprav danes že slišali in v glavnem smo slišali tudi o tem, kako so zelene površine, zelenje na naravi temelječe rešitve. Moja predstavitev bo pokazala malo širšo sliko in se bom navezala na prostorsko načrtovanje kot na nek celovit proces in tudi na to, kaj z njim lahko dosežemo in kako zato lahko, kaj vse lahko razumemo kot na naravi temelječe rešitve. Skratka, imamo naravo, s katero si pomagamo in iščemo rešitve za to, da ustvarjamo boljša mesta. Na tej prosojnici želim pokazati pravzaprav začetek nekega procesa, kako smo se začeli ukvarjati s tem, ko smo skušali usporediti na naravi temelječe rešitve in pa prostorsko načrtovanje. Kje najti skupne točke? Če se spomnite iz definicije, gre za to, da so to rešitve, ki lahko ne zgolj so naravne in uporabljajo naravne elemente kot take, ampak uporabljajo naravne procese, ki so lastni naravi. Zato smo ob pregledu številnih priročnikov, raznih dokumentov, ki so pravzaprav ponujali sezname teh rešitev, njihove tehnične opise, jih klasificirali, kateri od teh sodijo v tiste, ki uporabljajo naravo, kateri v tiste, ki jo posnemajo, ki določene naravne procese posnemajo in kateri so tisti, ki so hibridni. Seveda smo ob tem tudi povzeli, na katere tako imenovane družbene izzive odgovarjajo, v glavnem se vežejo na problematiko, kako vse prilagajati oziroma blažiti podnebne spremembe in seveda na izboljšanje stanja okolja. Ponavadi se vežejo na izboljšanje kakovosti zraka in tudi nekatere na obvladovanje hrupa. Zdaj ne bom šla v podrobnosti, ta tabela je obrazložena in je tudi na voljo v študiji, ki sem jo prej omenila, ampak samo že nek hitri pogled pokaže, da jih je kar nekaj in da so lahko ene in iste tiste, ki rešujejo več problemov. In to je ena zelo, zelo bistvenih lastnosti in značilnosti na naravi temelječih rešitev, ki so za potrebe prostorskega načrtovanja bistvene, ker namreč prostorsko načrtovanje teži k temu, da reši lahko več stvari naenkrat. No, če smo najprej pregledali, katere te rešitve so, še nismo nič prišli bliže k prostorskemu načrtovanju. Potem smo pogledali, v kakšnih, recimo temu, tipih prostorov določene rešitve lažje apliciramo. In smo rekli, neke 4 tipološke vzorce smo opredelili, neko zelo zgoščeno zazidavo, recimo značilno za mestna središča, celo mestna taka zgodovinska središča, kot je Kranj. Potem je neka bolj gosta zazidava, mešanica redke in goste pozidave, tudi seveda mešanice v smislu lastništva, javno in zasebno. In pa zadnji primer prikazuje praktično individualno gradnjo. No, na ta način smo že dobili eno sliko, kje mogoče kakšne redkeje ali težje prihajajo v poštev. In če pogledamo to prvo skupino, tiste, ki uporablja naravne procese, kjer so recimo tipične raščeni tereni z visoko ali pa z nizko vegetacijo, se nam kaj hitro lahko zgodi, da v že obstoječih strnjenih mestnih središčih preprosto nimamo dovolj prostora, da lahko uvedemo rešitev, ki bo nekaj pravzaprav rešila. Kar je za doseganje ustrezne izboljšave zraka oziroma za reševanje določenih ustreznih recimo teh nevihtnih padavinskih težav, preprosto ni prostora, da bi lahko s takšno rešitvijo to rešili. No, potem smo pa pogledali še v nek sistem prostorskega v bistvu dokumentov, ki jih uporablja naš sistem prostorskega načrtovanja. Smo pogledali, tudi ne bom šla v detajle, dokumente nad našim sistemom je prikazal v bistvu Tomaž, ampak mi pa imamo ta hip v izdelavi v bistvu interno neko raziskavo, kjer poskušamo ugotavljati, na katerem nivoju lahko na kak način upeljujemo to znanje o na naravi temelječih rešitvah. In nekako se zaenkrat kažejo v strateškem smislu uporabni regionalni in pa seveda občinski plani in pa veliko upanje polagamo v urbanistično zasnovo. To je lahko razprava tudi za naprej ali pa za kadarkoli naslednjič. Mi imamo to tudi še v izdelavi proučevanja. No, teh stvari sem se nekako dotaknila že prej, ki so na naslednji sliki. Torej, naravne rešitve, na naravi temelječe rešitve, ki neposredno uporabljajo naravne procese, so pač predvsem v strnjenih zazdalnih vzorcih praviloma zaradi stiske s prostorom težje uresničljive. Rešitve, ki pa v takih situacijah lahko pomagajo, so seveda tiste, ki jih najdemo med tistimi, ki posnemajo naravne procese in hkrati uporabljajo naravo, lahko pa tudi samo posnemajo. Recimo en tipičen primer je zelena stena oziroma zelena streha. Sama po sebi smo danes poslušali, takoj nekako nam zazveni zvonec, to je na naravi temelječa rešitev. Vkolikor se sistem vzdržuje, da uporablja pitno vodo, se moramo pač s tem ne strinjati. Na naravi temelječa rešitev je, kadar je tudi sistem v bistvu oskrbe zagotovljen na način, da se vzpostavi nek vodokrog, krožni vodni tok, ki v bistvu zbira padavinsko vodo in jo naprej v resnici uporablja. Kajti naravni procesi so tisti, katerih temelj je izmenjava snovi in energije. In to je tisto, kar je bistvo na naravi temelječih rešitev. In ja, v naslednjem koraku želim opozoriti tudi na to, na kar doslej nekako še nismo, ker smo se pogovarjali na naravi temelječih rešitvah kot o komponentah, ki črpajo iz žive narave, rastline. Imamo tudi neživo naravo, ki je del narave. In zelo je pomembno poznavati tudi to vrstne lastnosti, hkrati značilnosti materialov kot takih, skozi to značilnosti lokacij in ne nazadnje tudi že neka grajena struktura, lahko, če je dobro vpeta v prostor, pravzaprav določene te sestavine nežive narave, kot je prevetrenost prostora, ustrezno izkoristi za hlajenje. Ni potrebno iskati neke nove rešitve, oziroma bolj primerno je, da načrtovalci pravzaprav spoštujemo ali pa skušamo raziskati značilnosti lokacije, ustvarjanje vetrov, gibanje zračnih mas in potem tudi že opraviti analizo obstoječe grajene strukture, kako omogoča ali usmerja neke zračne mase, zračne tokove, in je ta zrak, ta veter, tudi element nežive narave in ga lahko naslavljamo kot na naravi temelječo rešitev. Torej, konfiguracijo prostora in terena lahko tudi izkoriščamo kot na naravi temelječo rešitev. It doesn't want to move? Hvala. No, pa smo šli že malo predaleč. No, skratka, o teh stvareh sem pravzaprav nekako prosto že povedala, tako da se lahko premaknemo na naslednjo prosojnico. Mogoče bi ta lahko potem kasneje bila za neko izhodišče v delavnicah in si jo lahko potem podrobneje pogledamo, ker skušamo pravzaprav poudarjati tudi to, da tudi kjer imamo tako imenovano nizko gostoto ali pa recimo temu individualno gradnjo, na naravi temelječe rešitve lahko ponujajo precej ustreznih rešitev, potem tudi kot napotkov, kako urejati na neki lokalni ravni individualno gradnjo in v kakšnem kontekstu se povezovati na področje komunalnega urejanja prostora. I'm really not good at that. Okay. Torej, kako pa zdaj te konkretne rešitve? V glavnem se je pri preučevanju tematike na naravi temelječih rešitev pokazalo, da obstaja prepoznavanje teh rešitev kot nekih konkretnih rešitev ali pa kot, da gre za nek koncept, ki naj pač preprosto skuša naravo pritegniti v mest. In zdaj je vprašanje, kako zdaj te konkretne rešitve ujeti tudi v merilih in vsebinah nekega strateškega načrtovanja. Vzpostaviti neko jasno povezavo med tem, kako lahko na strateški ravni nekaj usmerimo in kaj dejansko potem naredimo. Pravzaprav ko sem že prebirala vse te stvari, odkar se ukvarjam z naravi temelječimi rešitvami, me je ves čas vleklo nazaj k knjigi iz leta 1969, ki jo napisal Jan McHarg, Design with Nature. To je klasična literatura, vsaj na študijih krajinske arhitekture, pa verjamem, da tudi še kje, kjer je pravzaprav opozarjal na to, da je potrebno prepoznati lokacijo, znati postaviti analizo lokacije in ugotoviti, kaj ta lokacija ponuja, prinaša, kakšne so njene naravne danosti in kako to izkoristiti za umeščanje dejavnosti v prostor. Sicer je navadno ta miselnost nekako pokrivala širši odprti prostor, ne toliko mestna območja in mestne prostore, ampak zdaj skozi sodobno perspektivo na naravi temelječih rešitev in vsemi ostalimi podpornimi dokumenti na različnih ravneh, pravzaprav je priložnost, da to premaknemo na mestna okolja. In tudi nek način razumevanja potem že imamo, ker smo se s tem že srečali. In druga reč, na katero bi rada opozorila, je pa naslednja slika, ki je pravzaprav enaka, kot je pokazal prej Tomaž, ko je govoril o zelenih sistemih mest, s tem, da sem na tem slajdu pravzaprav izpostavila kategorijo režim zelenega sistema. To je vse tisto, kar vidite, da je črtkano in o čemer je tudi Tomaž govoril, da pravzaprav zeleni sistem ni kategorija namenske rabe. To je kategorija, ki pač povezuje lahko zelene elemente, vegetacijo v prostoru, seveda zelene površino kot rabo, ampak tudi tiste elemente zelenih površin, ki so znotraj industrije, stanovanj, obcestnih prostorov in tako naprej. In režim je taka kategorija, ki pokaže, kje vse je treba biti pozoren na to, da imamo zelene komponente postavljene, da celota deluje. In v tem kontekstu je takšna miselnost pomembna tudi za razumevanje na naravi temelječih rešitev, ki lahko delujejo le, če jih imamo in postavljamo kot sistem. Mislim s tem ne zelena streha tu pa tam, pa zelena stena tu pa tam, ampak da hkrati tudi se ukvarjamo s tem, kako rešujemo odvodnjo, kje lovimo vodo, kako vse skupaj povezujemo, da znamo ugotoviti, kar je še odprto vprašanje, na tem se še dela, kakšen je učinek, domet neke na naravi temelječe rešitve, dokam recimo temu v prostoru sega, kje zadane ob učinek druge rešitve, kakšna je sinergija teh učinkov. In to mislim, da so vse izzivi, ki jih ima prostorsko načrtovanje pred sabo in s katerimi se zdaj, ko poznamo, kaj so na naravi temelječe rešitve, ko sprejmemo tudi, da ob tem mislimo lahko tudi na lastnosti lokacije, predvsem na tudi hkrati tudi na vire, na bližino virov, da po analogiji kratka prehranska veriga, pravzaprav govorimo tudi o tem, da izkoriščamo vire čim bolj tam, kjer so. Skratka, vse to je na nek način povzeto v drugih besedah na tej prosojnici in se nadaljuje tudi v naslednjo, tako da mislim, da ta gradiva bodo ostala, to bo na voljo, da si lahko to pogledate v nekih izbranih stavkih. V principu sem se pa vsega tega že dotaknila in mislim, da bi zaključila samo s tem, da se mi zdi pomembno, da se spodbuja vključevanje na naravi temelječih rešitev v obstoječ sistem prostorskega načrtovanja, da je treba najti, kako in kje jih prikazati, kako in kje jih opredeliti. Mi seveda imamo že nekaj idej, nekaj smo že poskusili zapisati, niso še vse stvari nekako navzven izpostavljene, niso bile izpostavljene nekim debatam, mogoče imamo danes popoldne kakšno priložnost za to. Neke osnove, kako pa smo prišli do tega, so pa seveda na voljo v študiji, ki sem jo tudi pokazala na predstavitvi in je na voljo na spletni strani Ministrstva za okolje in prostor. Hvala lepa.
Voilà, Barbara. Voilà, this is, yeah, I mean, I've been listening to you before, but I think this message that you convey over and over again, to use really these elements of nature to respond to concrete, let's say more complex planning challenges as part of an integrated approach. I think that's so important, because what we see so often is indeed that we look into isolated, let's say, forms of what is called as NBS, but it's that mean to be more critical, that's not really NBS. So I think we need to take it really a step forward and to listen to you and other experts to see how we can really see this as part of a systemic approach and to make sure that we actually work a lot more with nature. That's the key question. I hand over now to my colleague Federica to start the discussion. So please take over, Federica.
Thanks, Mart, and thank you so much, Barbara, for such an enlightening presentation. I think it's so important to have a very critical approach to the concept of nature-based solutions, and you really highlighted the need to almost deconstruct it based on, you know, typology, location, functions of such solutions for actually making them work for local strategies. So the importance also of a place-based approach and an approach that is sensitive to the cultural and also, of course, environmental landscape of the places where these are implemented. I would like to open the floor for questions, both on site. This can be in English or Slovene. And maybe also online. So if participants attending via Zoom have any question, feel free to paste them in the chat and then we will read them out loud and discuss. Thanks.
Jana Kopitar iz občine Žalec, po izobrazbi krajinski arhitekt. Moram reči, da smo se mi na fakulteti vseh teh zadevah že učili pred 40 leti, pa v praksi nekateri so bili bolj uspešni, nekateri manj, odvisno pa tudi na kakšnem položaju si, oziroma v kakšnem odnosu si tudi s politiko, ne. Zanima me pa samo mogoče praktično vprašanje, a je ta sistem zelenih površin že vključen kot sestavni del urbanističnih zasnov? Vem, da se tam nekaj mora opredeliti, zelene površine, ampak verjetno sistemsko pa še to ni urejeno, ne? Kdaj se kaj pričakuje, da bi to bilo?
Hvala. Jaz sem prepričana, da na to vprašanje bodo bolj znali odgovoriti kolegi z ministrstva. Jaz bi pa mogoče samo komentirala, da to, kako mi vidimo vključevanje na naravi temelječih rešitev recimo v urbanistično zasnovo, je hkratno razumevanje potreb vzpostavitev zelenega sistema, potreb po zaščiti pred hrupom, potreb po poznavanju recimo padavinskih režimov, kroženja vode, sposobnosti komunalnih sistemov in pa seveda potrebe po njihovi, recimo temu, predelavi, da ne uide vsa voda po kanalih drugam, ampak da jo v resnici prestrežemo. V tem smislu mi želimo naslavljati na naravi temelječe rešitve kot sistem, seveda je pa nek vegetacijski pokrov, ki lahko tvori zeleni sistem, sigurno del tega sistema. Hvala.
I see we have another question, please.
No,
That's an explanation. Oh, sorry, please go ahead.
Odgovor. Pozdravljeni, moje ime je Nečirek, prihajam iz Ministrstva za okolje in prostor. Torej, mislim, ko smo že v zakonu o urejanju prostora 2, ZUREP 2 in ponovno v ZUREP 3 nadomestili v okviru urbanistične zasnove, bila je področje zelene površine z zelenim sistemom. Tako da to že je pokrito, je pa tako, kot je Barbara že povedala, se te na naravi temelječe rešitve rešuje tudi lahko skozi druga področja, tudi skozi prometno karto, torej kako so ulice, prometne površine ozelenjene oziroma skozi arhitekturno tipologijo, imamo zelene strehe, zelene fasade in tudi skozi urejanje gradbene parcele, ker smo pa prav tako uvedli nov termin raščen teren, torej tisti del, ki ne sme biti ne pozidan, ne prekrit, tako da omogoča odvodnjavanje vode v podzemlje. To so pač te manjše rešitve, s katerimi probamo na obstoječih, skozi obstoječe prakse, načrtovanje uvajati neke nove pojme, ne pa celotnega sistema.
Ja, če smem dodati, jaz mislim, pozabila sem navezati v bistvu na priročnike državnega prostorskega reda, ki jih je pokazal Tomaž, ne, in tudi o tem grajenem odprtem prostoru, tudi on je lahko velik potencial v resnici za uvajanje na naravi temelječih rešitev, ne nujno zgolj skozi ozelenitev, če je potrebno, seveda, in če imamo dovolj prostora in če spodnja infrastruktura to omogoča, torej če je spodaj pravzaprav na voljo, da ni neke druge infrastrukture, ki to onemogoča, Tako da, ja, jaz pozdravljam tudi te v resnici vaše priročnike in vidim, zdaj bom uporabila nek tak izrabljen izraz za na naravi temelječe rešitve, res kot dežnik, ki jih pa tudi lahko poveže in pomaga dati usmeritev, kako, mislim, da lahko pomagajo k razumevanju tega, kar mi želimo doseči, da bi jih razumeli kot sistem in da presežemo, da to pomeni zgolj sistem zelenih površin ali pa recimo temu zelena infrastruktura.
Moje ime je Marko Peterlin, prihajam z IPOP, Inštituta za politike prostora. Navezal bi se rad še na pravzaprav prejšnji dve predstavitvi, ki smo jih slišali, in debate, ki smo jih imeli v coffee breaku, no, na to temo. In pravzaprav se mi zdita obe predstavitvi prejšnji zelo pomembni in sta skratka tako ta zakon oziroma uredba, kakor bo že prevedena o Nature Restoration Law, kot tudi ta Urban Greening Plan, no, kot orodje, eno od orodij možnih za uresničevanje tega, lahko zelo pomembni orodji pri ciljih recimo blaženja in prilagajanja na podnebne spremembe oziroma blaženja podnebnih sprememb in prilagajanja nanje in seveda vseh učinkih, ki prihajajo iz oziroma pozitivnih učinkih ozelenitve mest. Danes pa skrbi, kako bo to mogoče v bistvu izvesti skozi pač nacionalno in na koncu lokalno zakonodajo, ne? Ker vse rešitve na koncu so pravzaprav lokalne, ne? Vse, kar se v resnici izvede, se izvede na lokalni ravni in še pač prav pogosto skozi neke recimo posege na mikroravni, se pravi na gradbeni parceli, na zelo lokalni ravni. In če ne bodo res, tako kot je bilo poudarjeno, če ne bo ta multilevel governance učinkovit že v fazi priprave, se pravi že zdaj, in v vseh nadaljnjih fazah, skozi izvajanje, skozi spremljanje, bomo lahko prinesli tudi veliko težav. Tomaž je prej izpostavil, ne, da recimo zamejevanje gradnje oziroma vračanje naravi samo na določenih občinah, recimo na mestnih občinah, ima lahko popolnoma nasprotne učinke željenim, sicer zelo dobronamernim rešitvam, ker seveda, če bomo zamejevali v mestnih občinah, ne pa tudi vseh ostalih, bomo spodbudili suburbanizacijo, kar je popolnoma nasproten cilj tistemu, kar želimo. Tako da bi mogoče res, ne vem pravzaprav koga naslavljam tukaj, ampak rad bi, da bi nekako se bolj odprla ta razprava tudi o tem, kakšni so možni debati tudi na evropski ravni na nek način, ne. Mogoče je to vprašanje za naše kolege iz EUKN-ja ali pa če nas še spremljajo tudi prek Zooma, no. Kako pravzaprav zagotoviti, da bojo učinki, ki jih skratka ta zakon zasleduje, dejansko takšni skozi vse te, bi rekel, filtre po različnih ravneh, na koncu taki, kakršni želimo, skratka.
Well, I can make a start, but actually my colleague Federica is much more knowledgeable on this topic. But in a more general way, what I can say is that, of course, I mean, there are all these European frameworks in place, the regulations, and I think the Nature Restoration Law is a very convincing example of let's say, a policy framework that will really oblige member states to comply with. I mean, for the first time, this will be legally binding, and I think that's absolutely new. It still needs to be approved. It's now to be discussed at the European Parliament, but I think that that's a major breakthrough. In addition to all that, of course, I mean, the way the EU works is by promoting policies like the European Green Deal, by inviting cities also, like in this 100 climate neutral and smart cities, to take a leadership role and to show by example how cities can become climate neutral. This is a hugely ambitious project, let's be honest about it. I mean, 100 cities in all different countries, including this city of Klein, but also many other cities, of course, in all different countries, to become completely climate neutral by 2030 is a huge ambition. But by doing so, by setting these targets, I think the EU really invites both member states and cities to develop policies and to implement concrete practices to become indeed, let's say, more sustainable. Same also for nature-based solutions. But for that, perhaps, Federica, you're working so much on nature-based solutions, you can take over to dig a bit deeper into nature-based solutions and how this can create this trickle-down effect as you refer to.
Yes, and thanks for such a complex question in a way that really allows us to argument more on this fundamental topic. So in my view, I think it's really about, going beyond the binding legal framework is about institutionalizing channels of communications among the different levels. And for us, such as this one, where you bring to the table policymakers at the national level with city makers and also stakeholders from academia and what we call the science policy interface. So actually this kind of connectors or organizations that also are able to translate knowledge into something that can be used by politics is fundamental. Now, at the European level, we know that the European Commission has really dedicated so much funds into strengthening this aspect. So a lot of the European projects are promoting multi-level partnerships, so partnerships among city governments, with NGOs, the private sector. And I think there is a lot of learning from to be gathered from these experiences. I also want to maybe go back to something that Shreya mentioned after her presentation, this idea of establishing green agents into administrations. And actually in the chat just before, Isabel mentioned the successful example of the city of Poznan in Poland, where this was successfully implemented. And maybe we could replicate this at the national level. And in a way, this is really why we're here. So I hope that will help, in a way, upscaling this for sure. I don't know if there are any other questions.
Well, perhaps if you allow me, Fede, to add two more aspects to this discussion. I already mentioned in my introduction this idea of the urban agenda for the EU. And one of the new topics agreed upon as part of the Ljubljana agreement is specifically on greening cities. I mean, this is a partnership that will start next week at the DG meeting under the Czech presidency. It will be formalized, and it means that this partnership will start. As a matter of fact, we as the EUKN will participate in this partnership, also representing to some extent the countries that are a member of our network. So in that respect, we're also looking forward to working very closely with Slovenia. But the idea of these partnerships is to identify, concrete obstacles and to come up with concrete solutions. You know, the concept of the partnership of the urban agenda, it's to come up with suggestions for better regulation, better funding, better knowledge, etc. But it means that for a couple of years, at least, cities, different cities, ministries, member states, but also different DGs within the European Commission will work together and look into, let's say, the best ways to green cities. I think that's another important. I mean, it's not perhaps that important in terms of funding available, but it is important in terms of, let's say, political offspin. And then what we also mentioned earlier is this idea of creating national hubs. We also would like to use the discussions of today to see if it would be possible to set up such a national hub here in Slovenia with support from the European programs like Network Nature. And we know our colleagues from ICLEI who were there. I don't know if they're still online, but they are working on setting up, on establishing actually these hubs in different, let's say, regions in Europe. So that's another way. But indeed, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of projects on NBS, to the extent that it almost becomes a sort of a new container concept, like sustainable. I think we should avoid that. And we need critical people like Barbara to keep us focused on what NBS really is and how it could really contribute in practice. All right, let's continue.
Thanks for these remarks indeed. Final round of questions, if there are any. No. Then it's time to move. Oh no, yes, there is. 1 second then.
Is it working? Yes. How does nature, let's say this nature preservation law relate to water management? Because as Barbara pointed out, water is one of the key issues connecting nature-based solutions also. And we've heard, Federica, you were at the event also, that at the EU level and the global level, basically most climate change adaptation issues are related to water in one way or another. And still water is not managed as a, let's say, a whole circle somehow, but it's divided into so many separate problems. So is there a way to basically connect through the implementation maybe, or at the systemic level somehow, nature preservation and water management somehow? Maybe Barbara.
Bom odgovarjala v slovenščini, v redu. Ja, jaz mislim, da je tukaj to preprosto zelo pomembno, ker je namreč brez vode ni življenja. In če govorimo o nature-based solutions, to vključuje v bistvu vodo in je potrebno se nekako. Zato želimo, pravzaprav ravno zato, no, da tudi v takih dokumentih, kot je recimo, zdaj so ti novi, ki nastajajo oziroma so že v sprejemanju, da se dovolj celovito razume, kako lahko razumemo na naravi temelječe rešitve. Jaz mislim, da je pomembno upoštevati vprašanje vode. Pomembno je upoštevati vprašanje tal, pomembno je upoštevati vprašanje pač lokacije tudi v smislu tal, prsti, kamninske osnove, vsega tega, hkrati erozije, delovanja vetra. Skratka, vse. Ne moremo se ukvarjati zgolj z ozelenjevanjem. Ozelenjevanje je lahko končni rezultat, ampak zaradi to želimo razumevanje na naravi temelječih rešitev razširiti v bistvu na celotno dojemanje narave kot živo in neživo naravo in prenos v bistvu energije snovi med njimi, zato ker to pač preprosto tako je. In če ne bomo upoštevali, da gre za dinamični sistem, potem pač tudi mi živimo v dinamičnem sistemu. Tudi vse je dinamičen sistem in ne moremo se, mislim, da je skrajni čas, da se premaknemo v bistvu tudi v smislu načrtovanja prostora od predstave, da načrtovanje prostora je narisanje plana, karte v 2D. Na naravi temelječe rešitve ponujajo nek razmislek, kako to dopolniti, kako mogoče za začetek, ker smo načrtovalci in se znamo ukvarjati z layerji, vsaj skozi neke razne te layerje, nivoje predstavimo, kako lahko upoštevamo določene vidike, ki jih še ne moremo prikazati kot namenska raba. Zdaj bom še bolj provokativna, mogoče čez nekaj desetletij sploh ne bomo več risali namenske rabe, bomo risali samo sisteme na naravi temelječih rešitev in mobilnosti in ne vem česa in bo vse skupaj čisto drugačna slika. Ampak pomembno je začeti zdaj razmišljati o tem in v bistvu v to, kar znamo, to vključevati. Kaj bo prišlo, bomo videli, če ne mi, pa še tisti za nami. Hvala.
Absolutely. And I can only reiterate this and the added layer of complexity is that water has no border. So thinking of having a siloed approach to addressing this is completely out of the question. But now I think it's time to move somewhere warmer. So we would like to go to Barcelona and give the floor to our colleague in the Horizon 2020 project, Connexus, Arnau Yuc, who works as an environmental and GIS technical expert at Barcelona Regional. So please, Arnau, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning. I will share my presentation. Do you see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Oh, sorry, I hear myself doubled. Okay. So thank you to EUKN for the invitation and to Ministry of Environmental and Special Planning. And well, I will talk about measuring urban green and assessing integrated benefits in Barcelona. So first of all, I will talk a bit about why is urban green important. I am sure we all know about it. Then the green infrastructure of the city of Barcelona. Then I will explain what we have measured. And finally, I will explain two projects we're working on, one about urban parks and another one about urban allotments. So why is urban green important? Well, first of all, it is important for the health, then for social cohesion. Urban green also provides socio-environmental services, and finally provides contact with nature. So all these aspects increase the well-being and quality of life of the citizens, which is the main objective. What green infrastructure we have in the city of Barcelona? This is the NDVI map, which shows some of the green infrastructure. In Barcelona, we have protected areas, so natural areas like forest or rivers. Then street trees, then also biodiversity hotspots, private green, and finally, urban parks and urban allotments. So in this presentation, I will focus on urban parks and urban allotments. So what we have measured? In urban parks, we had made a study about socio-environmental services of all the parks in Barcelona. And in urban allotments, we are working on a project, on a European project, Connexus project, where we study also socio-environmental services of these urban allotments and social, environmental, and health benefits of these urban allotments. This project is still on progress, but I will explain some results. So first of all, I will introduce the urban parks study. So why do we analyze socio-environmental services? The final point, the final objective is to have a tool for planning and managing green spaces. So to design and manage criteria, to have some criteria in managing and designing, and also urban planning criteria. Like we detected deficits of these services, and then we can plan next urban parks according to these studies. Well, I am sure you all know what is an ecosystem services, but in case you don't, ecosystem services are the benefits that humans obtain from ecosystems and that contribute directly or indirectly to the well-being of people. This concept of ecosystem services are focused on natural ecosystems and are grouped into 4 groups, the services: provisioning services like food or water, regulating services like air quality or pollination, then cultural services like mental and physical health or spiritual experience or tourism, and finally the supporting services, which are mainly the biodiversity, so habitat biodiversity, genetic biodiversity. So our point was to transform the concept of ecosystem services in natural ecosystems to urban spaces. So in this transformation and in this adaptation in urban environments, we refer to ecosystem services as socio-environmental services, because in urban parks, the cultural or social part of the services are very important. So in social and in environmental services, we group all the services into 8 categories. The first category, ecological and regulating, was services like thermal regulation or infiltration and permeability. And then the other 7 groups, the other 7 groups was leisure, like walking, sports, health, like contribution to mental or physical health, psychological and spiritual, like resting or artistic inspiration, then social, meetings, interaction, social cohesion, services about urban planning, so for example, reduction of urban density, and finally, tourism or economy. In total, we analyze 29 socio-environmental services. To evaluate these services, we used 52 indicators, and we evaluate 355 parks, urban parks, almost all parks in Barcelona, from smallest one to biggest ones. We visited all these 355 parks, and we also do GIS work and other kind of work in order to have all these 52 indicators. Here you have a table with in the left, you have left or right, you have 29 ecosystem services, and at the top of the table you have the 52 indicators. So as you can see here, not every indicator is used to evaluate every ecosystem services. So some indicators are used in different ecosystem services, and another ones for another services. And we also weighted the different indicators depending on the and on the service we wanted to evaluate. So here are some results. This is the average valuation by every green space. So the average valuation between 29 social environmental service. And here you have the top 10. For example, the first one was Ciutadella. If you know a little bit Barcelona, Ciutadella or Guinardó Park or Güell Park. Right. Apart from that, we also calculate the walking accessibility to all these parks. So in the left image, you have all parks in Barcelona, so big parks, green squares, pocket parks. And at the right, you have only the biggest parks or parks more than 1 acre. In Barcelona, we don't have very big parks. The biggest park is 20 acres. So here you can see the differences between the coverage, the accessibility in two big parks or smaller ones. And then we wanted to sum up the evaluation of the parks with the accessibility in order to have a territorialized map with the overall accessibility. So the green zones have higher accessibility to services, and the red ones have lower accessibility to different services. And with all this, we also calculate the deficits of services in all the city, in order that this could be used to plan future parks and to improve also the ones that are today in Barcelona. Well, now I will explain the study about urban allotments as part of the green infrastructure. So first of all, what we know about urban allotments in Barcelona. We did a lot of questions. We had a lot of questions, like what social interactions take place there? What do they contribute to urban biodiversity? What is the production of every urban allotments, and so on. In this work, we didn't try to answer all the questions, but some of them we try to answer. For this purpose, we create the Urban Agriculture Observatory, where we are creating just now, linked with Barcelona Connexus Life Lab. And the main objective of this observatory is to establish a database of environmental and social aspects of urban allotments and analyze their benefits. So we want to get information on agricultural production, cultivated biodiversity, food and health, social relations, etc. We also wanted to create a space for communication and participation in the urban agriculture, open to users, entities, associations, and the citizens in general. And finally, positioning Barcelona as a reference city in urban agriculture policies. So first of all, we needed to know how much urban allotments exist in Barcelona. So in Barcelona, there are 189 municipal and social enhanced through green urban allotments, which are different programs of the Barcelona City Council. Then we have 349 scholar urban allotments, which are not the focus of this study. And among all these urban allotments, we studied for the moment 29. We are still studying more, but for the moment we have 29 municipal and hence to green urban allotments. municipal urban allotments are dedicated only to elder people, to retired people. So what methodology we use? We divide the study into 4 categories. So the social part that we do surveys to the users and entities of urban allotments. Then we also study social and environmental services using adapting the methodology I showed before in urban parks. Then we are measuring food production through weighting food production and also surveys. And finally, cultivated biodiversity through surveys and go into field. Now, today I will only explain some results of the social and socio-environmental services part, because the other ones are in progress. So in social surveys, we did 189 surveys to urban allotment users and entities with 34 questions regarding health, regarding agriculture, and regarding social cohesion. Here there are some results, like for example, age and gender. The average age was 34 in municipal urban allotments. Then 80% was male and 20% female. So this could have this knowledge could give to the Barcelona City Council some ideas in order to apply gender policies. Then we also ask how often they come to the urban allotments, and their average was 3 days per week and 2 hours per day. And why do they come to the urban allotments? For example, they say that they wanted to spend spare time to exercise, growing what they eat, nature connection, or social relationships with the schools and other mates. We also ask about agriculture. What kind of agriculture is practiced? 99% practice organic farming, which is really mandative in this kind of urban allotments. 92 abroad spontaneous vegetation. Then 96 use fertilizers, and 33 use ecological phytosanitary products. So in the part of social and environmental services, as we did in urban parks, we also group the services into 4 categories: environmental services like food production, ecosystem functionality or thermal regulation, social services like meeting or social cohesion, health services like mental or active aging, and urban planning services like improving landscape, sponging of urban density, etc. Here we get a average valuation of all the 16 analyzed services. And here you can see the results of the 4 groups. So when we have these results and we will work about it, we can do policies on management and on planning on these urban allotments. So thank you very much for your attention.
Yes, thank you very much, Arnaud. Hola. I saw your presentation before, to be honest, and I was a bit surprised when I saw the statistics about these urban allotments. But now I understand, I must say, thanks to your presentation. So it also shows that it is important to have your explanation as well. I understand that these urban allotments are a specific aspect of green infrastructures in the city, indeed, and that explains why elderly men basically are let's say using these green spaces. That's quite a specific let's say example of how green spaces are used, of course. I was just wondering if you also looked into the same, let's say, demographic figures with regard to the other green spaces in Barcelona, the parks, actually. I mean, I do hope at least that not only older men are visiting those parks. Can you elaborate a bit more on that, please?
Yeah, well, in previous years, we already studied urban parks. We have a lot of studies on urban parks. The ecosystem services study, but the city council also have surveys about the use of the parks. And some years ago, we also did a study about how citizens use the park. So which kind of use, for example, running or playing or relationships. And we study like 10 parks in Barcelona during one day, so from 8 in the morning till 8 in the afternoon, and we detect which area of the park they do the uses and the frequency of use. So we saw, for example, that in the morning there are not many users, then in the midday there are more users, then at lunchtime users decrease, and then, for example, when the children go out from the school, the use of the parks usually increase. And the Barcelona City Council have another kind of surveys and so on. So we had a lot of material regarding urban parks, because probably it's the most important area in green infrastructure, apart from street trees. So in this case, we wanted to focus on urban allotments, because Barcelona City Council is starting, or some 5-10 years ago was starting the urban allotments, permissions, etc. So we need studies in order also to combine technicians and politicians.
Yeah, wonderful. I think it explains a lot. Okay, that was a burning question. I think indeed also very useful for the audience here on site. I'd like to open the floor now for any questions from you here on site. But of course, as Federica already said, listeners to the, or viewers to the participating in the Zoom video stream can also ask questions in the chat. So I will have a look from time to time to my colleague Nathan also to see if there are questions in the chat. But first here, anyone here, are there any questions? Yes. So that's Tomas for you, Arnaud, from the Ministry of the Environment and Spatial Planning.
Ja, hvala lepa. Najprej hvala za res zanimivo prezentacijo. Del, ki mene pravzaprav se mi zelo zanimivo, je ta del, kjer ste pokazali vse podatke o dostopnosti do zelenih površin v Barceloni. Pri nas se zdaj že nekaj časa ukvarjamo prav s tem, da bi želeli za mesta zračunati pač ta kazalnik dostopnosti. Pri nas se ukvarjamo pač s tem skupaj z različnim uradom Republike Slovenije. Imamo kar precej velike težave pri podatkih. Težave niso podatki o prebivalcih, težave so predvsem podatki o zelenih površinah. Zdaj me zanima, katere podatke ste pri vas uporabili. So podatki, katere pač mesto Barcelona uporablja za vzdrževanje zelenih površin, oziroma njihove podatke o parkovnih površinah, a ste zdaj mogoče še druge podatke, kaj se imamo, open source data, Copernicus podatke o namenskih rabah in tako naprej.
Okay, for accessibility, we did a GIS calculation, and we polygonize every green space, every urban park, and then we also polygonize every entrance to the park, and then we use the grid, the street grid of the city, in order to have a buffer at 5, 10, and 15 minutes walking from the parks. And then we also have, if we want to calculate the population into these accessibilities areas, we also have the population digitalized. So that's the main information. But then, apart from accessibility, as we wanted to measure the socio-environmental services, we collect 52 indicators. Some indicators was given to us for the Barcelona City Council, but a lot of indicators we went to field. We did field work, and we collected them. So we count benches, fountains, all trees, all species trees, vegetation coverage, all the indicators, mostly all the indicators we were collecting in field work. I am not sure if this answers your question.
Yeah, you did. Thank you. Thank you very much. What you're actually trying to do, we try to find basically, and as I said, the demographic data is no problem because we have very good data on the residents. We know the locations where they live and so on. But yeah, the problem is that there's no database on green areas that would be, let's say, used for all the cities or for even for the entire area of the state. That is a problem, and that's why I was thinking that maybe we have a kind of a smart solution that's not really digitizing, everything. Thank you.
For Thomas and others who are interested in this project, in the chat, we have a link to the description of this case study about Barcelona. Okay, there's room for one more question. Who has a burning question that needs to be answered before we go to the next speaker? Not really? Then one?
I do actually.
Well, Federica has. Okay, then I'll give the floor to Federica. Please go ahead.
I'll ask it from here. Well, let's say, before I had another question. So really focusing on what are the data needs and the data gaps within the municipality to measure, let's say, all of these integrated benefits. But now I'm also thinking, we are talking a lot about measuring benefits, and often one of the critiques to nature-based solutions is actually they can lead to also very negative consequences for residents if you don't apply a very socially inclusive and integrated approach. And I was wondering whether you have also measured maybe the negative externalities of green intervention, and whether that might also be a data gap. Yeah.
Well, the negative.
Well, you're thinking.
Yeah. Can I speak? Well, the negative.
Yeah, please go ahead.
The negative parts of NBS, in my opinion, well, we are not working on this really, but Barcelona City Council is trying to work on this. For example, on green gentrification, but green gentrification sometimes it's a polemic topic. And well, I am not sure if I understand you well when you say that if we collect data about the negative aspects of urban green.
Yes, you understand correctly. So you mentioned gentrification. as a very clear example, so green gentrification. And I don't know if we maybe should also focus measuring efforts on this, because then you have a way more complete picture, and then you can also, let's say, address it from the onset. So I think it's very much a design problem in a way.
Yeah, of course, we collect data on trying to address the social justice or the gender gap, for example. We collect data on the gender of the urban users in order that Barcelona City Council could do policies to solve it, for example. And we also analyze in urban parks, we analyze the disservice of allergic that the trees can do. So yes, we analyze just one disservice. We analyze 29 services and one disservice, which is the allergies.
Okay, thanks. That's interesting, and maybe food for thought for the working
yeah, of course.
Discussion.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Oh no, there is another question. So just one moment.
Dober dan, jaz sem že se predstavila, Marjana Kopitar iz občine Žalec. Jaz bi vam mogoče samo povedala par negativnih odgovorov, ki jih dobimo od občanov, ne. Jaz imam srečo, da v bistvu živim v zelenem mestu, Velenje, zeleno mesto. Tudi Žalec je majhno mesto, ampak dobivamo ozelenjeno, dobivamo pripombe od ljudi, na primer glede drevja, ne. Pada smola na avtomobile z iglavcev, pada smola ob pokopališču na grobove, listje pada na grobove, listje pada na parkirišče in pride do prometnih nesreč. Drevje se lahko prevrne, tako da te sisteme je v bistvu treba vzdrževati, in to vzdrževanje je kar drago, ne, to obrezovanje dreves. Tako da je zelo pomembno načrtovanje v bistvu v osnovi, ne. Trenutno pa rešujemo neke stare probleme in ljudje se pritožujejo res na vse sorte stvari. To so pa pol tisti negativni, ne. Posekajte drevesa ob pokopališču, ker nam listje pada na grobove in take zadeve. In smola. In spremljati je treba rast, kako je visoko drevje, da se ne prevrne na objekte, obrezovati, odstranjevati stara drevesa. No, nazadnje smo dobili tudi od plinovoda, ja, da drevje se pa lahko prevrne na plinske postaje in moramo zdaj v okolici plinske postaje posekati vsa drevesa, ne, tako da so potem tudi neka dela za vzdrževanjem teh sistemov.
Okay, I know the negative aspects of having trees in your city and how citizens sometimes complain about, I mean, indeed, falling leaves, etc. Okay, short answer from your side, please.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The people that are that work with management of urban green spaces, I know that have a lot of problems like this that you mentioned, and here in Barcelona we also have these problems. And now the city council is trying to naturalize the city, so letting grow different spaces in, for example, near the trees. And a lot of people say that this is because the city council didn't manage it, and a lot of people is against this naturalization. But I think one important thing we have to do is to communicate. And for example, there are examples of communication, like putting like in the trees, explaining what the tree do, what's the benefits of tree, that they give us good air or good quality of air, or they decrease the temperatures. But well, I am not on the managing side of the Barcelona City Council, but I think we have the same problems like in Slovenia.
Thank you very much, Arnaud. Yes, I think indeed it's so important that raising this public awareness, communicating about the benefits of the MBS. I'm sure that Barbara, with her view also on the integrated approach and bringing indeed nature back to cities, would also fully agree. You need to also work with the public, because otherwise indeed there's a risk, as you just said, that citizens start complaining about issues that might seem trivial, but for them are probably quite important, and that also requires a good political communication.
Can I add
With this,
something?
I would like to close this section. Thanks. Yes, well, very short, please.
Yes, very
go ahead.
short. Probably the problems with urban green are more in the streets than in the urban parks and urban allotments, because our concept of urban parks and urban allotments are more naturalized places, but the streets should be for the cars, and so I think that the problem.
Well, not really, I would say, but indeed. No, important point, and all the more. I mean, it means that indeed we need to also, I mean, policymakers, practitioners, I mean, everyone involved in city development need to be aware of how to communicate that message, and that we also need to look differently to having indeed more nature in our cities and bring back nature to the cities. All right. Thank you very much, Arnaud. See you soon in one of our Connexus meetings. And I'd like to close this part now, this panel discussion. We are running indeed a bit out of time, because we have had these interesting discussions. But before we break for lunch, we still have an interesting other panelist joining us from Ireland, and that's Isabel Fletcher. She's the acting CEO of Horizon NUA. I see you, Isabel. Good morning. And actually, you're representing yet another Horizon 2020 project working on nature-based solutions. I already said there are so many of them. Well, Connecting Nature is one of the bigger ones. And you are actually working on a topic which is extremely interesting, financing urban NBS. And it would be really interesting to hear from your side, from your experiences, how actually you can bring in different stakeholders. We already talked about multi-level governance, but multi-level governance also involves multi-level stakeholder involvement. And one of the stakeholders with whom it's sometimes a bit difficult to collaborate is also the private sector. So how does this public-private cooperation in financing urban NBS works in practice? I think these are also the topics that you will address in your presentation, right?
Thank you, Martin. Yes,
and with that, I would like to give you the floor.
Thank you, Martin. Yes, I hope to touch on some of
Go
this.
ahead, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
And delighted to be here today, and thank you so much for the invitation. So as Martin said, my name is Isabel Fletcher. I work with an organization called Horizon NUA. We're actually a spin-out enterprise of the Connecting Nature project, and we came into existence because of this need to be able to translate research findings into actionable tools for cities to use. And the area that we focus in on is the whole area of financing for nature-based solutions and supporting nature-based entrepreneurship. So very briefly, and I'm going to go through this very quickly, the Connecting Nature project actually finished in May of this year. We're actually one of the first past the post, and so I'm delighted to be able to bring you some of the findings of the project as in relation to finance as I go through the presentation. We were a €12 million action with over 40 partners from 16 different countries, with hubs in Brazil, China, Korea and the Caucasus. We worked with many different stakeholders, including the local authorities, communities, SMEs, NGOs and academics, and really the remit of the project was to work with cities to implement large-scale nature-based solutions in urban settings. And by large scale, I mean, that in itself, I mean, has many different interpretations. So our cities might have implemented sort of restoration of enormous big municipal parks, as they did in Pavlos Melis in Greece, which is an ongoing project around the restoration of a former military camp, or it was the scaling out of small interventions across the city to create impact and scale. The major
Isabel,
can you hear me?
May I briefly interrupt? Can
Yeah?
you show the full screen? Yes, but sorry,
Oh, you're not seeing my screen. Oh, I beg
can you show the full screen? Yeah, we see the window only.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Hold on. Do you know what?
It's a bit
Yeah.
easier for the
Wait
audience
till
to follow.
Just sorry. One moment. I had two screens open, which is why I think it wasn't. Okay. Can you see a full screen there?
Perfect. Yeah, now it's perfect. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay,
please.
I beg your pardon. I'm sorry about that. Just very briefly, really the main outcome of the Connecting Nature project was this Connecting Nature framework, which is a tool for cities and local authorities to use in the design, in the planning, delivery and implementation and ongoing management of nature-based solutions. I won't go into it in detail, but just so you can see in each element that there are 7 different building blocks ranging from technical solutions through to impact assessment, and cities can choose which ones are the priority for them at any given time. There's a range of guidebooks for each of the different elements, and you can find links to the framework here on the screen. There are a number of videos, and we will put links up in the chat. But I'm going to talk to you today about the financing and business models, and I'm going to touch on the nature-based enterprises. So just to give a little bit of context around the current state of funding for nature-based solutions versus what's required by 2030. You can see on the graph on the right here that investment is currently in and around the range of $133 billion a year in nature-based solutions. And the vast majority of that is funded by the public sector. And the ambition and the target is a tripling of investment by 2030, and really an increased emphasis on reducing the dependency on public funds and increasing the relationship with the private sector and increasing the funding from the private sector. So historically, there has been that lack of collaboration with the private sectors and maybe with community projects, and this really needs to change if we are going to bring the sector on board and increase investment in nature-based solutions. There's also something we need to touch on as well, that as the demand for nature-based solutions increases, so too does the demand for suppliers of nature-based solutions. And I'm going to touch on that again at the very end, because we can't increase the delivery if we don't have enough skilled suppliers to provide the solutions. Very briefly, just to give you an overview of who pays for nature-based solutions. You can see on the left here that sort of small scale nature-based solutions like community gardens, public parks. Majority of these are quite often funded by non-government actors like community groups, social enterprises, private investors through sources like crowdfunding and donations, and perhaps some small grant and government-led intervention is sometimes made available. At the other end of the scale, as the size and level of investment in the nature-based solution increases, so too does the level of public funding. And throughout, you can see that there is quite often a mix of hybrid financing, a combination of both public funds and private investment. As I mentioned, that the level of investment in nature-based solutions is increasing. So just to look at the market context and give some examples, you can see in the whole area of green walls and roofs and facade, the green building sector, just in Austria alone, includes 550 companies with 1,200 jobs. And that is growing at a rate of 9% a year, dating back to 2014. In nature-based solutions for health and well-being, the value of visiting nature to mental health and well-being has been estimated at 5.5 trillion a year globally. And finally, nature-based solutions for water management and treatment, where there's an estimated US $25 billion being invested globally in green infrastructure for water in 2015, an 11% increase over the previous year. So we can see that the demand for nature-based solutions is increasing, and we know that nature-based solutions can be paid for in different ways and are often financed by different sources. But what are the different financing needs of nature-based solutions? And if you look at the graph below, we have identified in Connecting Nature that there are 3 phases of financing. First is the planning phase, which includes the design and the co-creation with the stakeholders of what the intervention might look like. Second is the capital investment, so the actual delivery of the NBS, which is usually delivered over a relatively short time period, but with the highest cost. And third is the ongoing operational maintenance phase, which relates to the monitoring and maintenance of the NBS. The costs here are usually lower, but they're spread over a much longer period of time. And our research and our findings from interacting with the cities is that oftentimes the focus is here on the capital investment. Public sector financing remains an important source of financing the NBS, but there's not enough consideration goes into this third phase here of planning a sustainable business model to secure a return on the investment. And this is where the opportunity, I think, really lies for cities to look at alternative models for funding and the ongoing costs of a nature-based solution that reduce the dependency on public funds. So how then can cities create sustainable business and financing models for nature-based solutions? Well, to help answer that, in the Connecting Nature project, we developed a financing and business models guidebook as part of the overall framework, with 4 steps for cities and local authorities to follow when establishing sustainable finance and business models. One of the most important and critical aspects really is establishing a solid support base. High-level political and public administration support really is a key success factor to ensuring the long-term sustainable financing. Having cross-party political support and top-level support from public administrators can help secure the cross-departmental collaboration that's often required in designing and implementing and managing nature-based solutions, help breaking down those internal silos and reducing sort of the dependency, contributing to reducing the dependency for the whole intervention on maybe just one department in the city authority. To secure city support, though, or top-level support, it is really important that nature-based solutions should be clearly aligned with the overall city vision, their strategies, planning policies and programs. And at a bottom-up level, then obviously with the citizens and the stakeholder needs through a clear process of engagement and co-production. It's important to note also that public sector finance can be used to leverage financing then from other sources. It is an important tool in that regard, the public sector funding. Step 2 then really is all around creating the sustainable business models and financing. And we have created within Connecting Nature project a customized business model canvas guidebook and workshop to help city authorities and organizations plan the long-term business model for their nature-based solution. This tool has been used by all of the cities, the 10 cities in the Connecting Nature project, and has actually been requested now over 200 times from ourselves in Connecting Nature. It really can be used, the canvas can be used as a standalone setting in a city council to build collaboration across multiple departments. But it can also be used almost as a co-creation or co-production tool to bring together the different stakeholders from different institutions and organizations to build a consensus on what the common vision for a nature-based solution might be. What I want to point out, the 2 things I want to point out on this When we talk about the value proposition on the business model canvas for nature-based solutions, we always consider it from three aspects: the environmental aspect, the social aspect, and the economic aspect. And with city councils, we work right through each of the elements here, looking at what the activities are required, what resources are required from each of these three aspects to give a holistic picture of what the NBS might look like. And that in turn helps identify perhaps new partners and new sources of funding who may not have been considered alternatively in a previous, in a more traditional sort of business model format. Also important to think about is the whole governance structure of the NBS. Who's going to take responsibility for it? Who's going to manage it? Are there possibilities of bringing in new stakeholders and new players here? So it's really helpful to to start thinking about this almost at the outset of the design of the nature-based solution. Cost structure and cost reduction, how you might reduce the ongoing costs and how you might measure, capture the value to help monitor and report on the effectiveness and the impact of the nature-based solution. Financing the upfront costs are much easier to do, and the challenge here with all of our cities has really been around the ongoing operational costs. So once the business model canvas has been completed, and it really is an exercise in brainstorming and bringing together lots of different stakeholders, then the thing is to form an action plan that helps you to start secure funding, to start looking through the resources that are needed, the actions that are needed, and who or where might the funding come from. And we would have worked through this process with all of our cities and done a period of reflexive monitoring with them to address sort of barriers or challenges that they encountered along the way, to pivot and maybe look at alternative sources when the funding applications may have fallen through or what have you. The final step then, and this is really important, I think, is about measuring the impact, building this in, measuring the impact and return on investment of the nature-based solution. It's increasingly important for all types of investors, not just private investors, but public funds need to know that the money that they're investing is delivering value for money, is delivering impact. And when cities are reporting back on that, if they build in the measurement and the indicators from the outset, it makes that much easier. Also, I think by having the facts and figures, it enhances and it encourages the wider take up and financing of nature-based solutions. So I want to just mention very briefly there, in terms of developing, monitoring and evaluation plans in Connecting Nature, we developed a very easy to use tool called Co-Impact that's freely available for cities to select the indicators for their nature-based solutions, or to consider the indicators that they might want to use when creating a monitoring and evaluation plan. So just to finish off, some of the results and key sort of barriers and enablers of the Connecting Nature findings. Our cities to date have secured in excess of €52 million to implement their nature-based solutions. The public sector financing is still the biggest contributor. The major barrier has been sort of a lack of knowledge about NBS and awareness, both within the city and beyond, then at the wider stakeholder level. So this building knowledge and capacity around what nature-based solutions are and how they can impact positively on cities is really, really important. Culture of city authorities, this kind of siloed way of working and breaking down those barriers was quite a challenge for some of our cities. And that working together, that experience of collaboration, both at interdepartmental and also with the private sector, was a barrier that was faced. And I think over the 5 years we've gone some way. Our cities have gone quite a distance in challenging those. The enablers of the Connecting Nature NBS projects was that pilot projects were really important as a proof of concept and to build trust with the different stakeholders, to show that something works and then that it has that possibility to be scaled up and scaled out. High-level political and public administration support has been a real enabler to unlocking routes to finance and support. Nature-based solutions are not the sole remit and responsibility of the Environment Department. There are multiple departments who have roles to play. And for example, in Poznan, one of our cities, the Department of Education now has come on board to co-finance and co-manage the network of kindergarten playgrounds, natural playgrounds that have been developed in Poznan through the project. It started as a pilot action of 10 kindergartens, playgrounds being natural playgrounds with natural fibres and materials being used, and it's now expanded to 40, with another 10 being added each year, all being funded now by the Department of Education, thereby reducing the onus on the Department of the Environment to fund these projects. And then where we found was the openness to financial innovation in the stewardship phase, so this long-term management phase of the nature-based solution. And just some examples there I might give you are in A Coruña, where in Spain, where the projects were about community gardens and community allotments. This whole reliance on the municipality to maintain, to repair, to kind of row in behind the allotment holders in terms of support has reduced somewhat by giving ownership and working with the allotment holders in terms of building their capacities and forming associations and introducing membership fees, where those fees are now used to kind of repair and manage and maintain the overall structures, while the individuals maintain their plots. So it's just some small examples there. Just in relation to, if you bear with me now, I'm going to go through this really quickly. What does it look like when you engage the nature-based enterprises in the delivery of nature-based solutions? You've already seen this graph, the 3 stages of financing. And if you think about what sort of enterprises could work with cities and other people in other organizations in the delivery of nature-based solutions, at the planning stage, you could bring in the landscape architects, the biodiversity experts, perhaps specialized horticultural contractors for the capital investment, and maybe then social enterprises to take over the long-term management and reduce the sort of the onus or the responsibility of the local authority in this over time. What are nature-based enterprises? This was on the basis of the research done by Trinity College in the Connecting Nature project. Nature-based enterprises have been defined, or maybe are driven, by a mission to work with and for nature to address climate change and biodiversity challenges. Of the survey and the research undertaken as part of the project, almost 150 different enterprises were surveyed, and they were engaged in economic activities either directly or indirectly related to nature and nature-based solutions. So we have categorized them into these 11 sectors that you see here. So you almost have direct activities, such as ecosystem restoration and management, NBS for public spaces such as parks, and more indirect activities like the advisory services, community engagement, engaging with the different stakeholders, research, education and innovation, and maybe financial services. The difference then, we're asked oftentimes, what's the difference between a nature-based enterprise and, say, for example, a social enterprise or a bioeconomy enterprise? And really at the top level, you can see a fundamental difference in the mission orientation, which also leads to, I suppose, a difference in the terms then of the rationale for scaling and interest in investment. So economic goals first, really for sort of the non-nature-based enterprises. and they seek to maximize economic benefits predominantly while doing no harm. But on the nature-based enterprise side of it, it's really about maximizing the nature positive and the societal impact that their enterprises make. So I think, what we're finding is that nature-based enterprises offer much potential to underpin this just transition that we all hear so much about. All of these just transition strategies offering high-skilled and sometimes low-skilled employment opportunities in the area of nature-based solutions. Very quickly, just some examples of nature-based enterprises, the green facades that Barbara talked about by Helix Flansen. Other ones are this Dutch company called Tremania, who have implemented sensors to monitor soil technology that monitor the health of trees. So measuring impacts in the soil, measuring impacts on climate and temperature, whether the tree needs watering and so on. So it helps citizens and cities better understand, monitor and manage the NBS. The market, a bit like the NBS market, is highly fragmented and the sectors are at the different stages of development. Some of the barriers, a bit like in nature-based solutions, political, financial, legal, regulatory barriers are among the important challenges faced by this new sector of nature-based enterprises and the nature positive economy. And again, we have found that political leadership is a key enabler alongside pilots and experimentation of kind of supporting the role of nature-based enterprises in delivering, managing and implementing nature-based solutions. So very briefly, just to touch on the nature-based enterprise guidebook, there are 3 steps when it comes to developing a strategy for your city that can be sort of delivered in tandem with the finance and business models, or can be developed in tandem. Awareness and strategic alignment, very much like the finance and business models. Taking stock and building alliances with different innovation ecosystem actors in the city to help support, and then planning, implementing and monitoring a customized enterprise support program. Just some examples of the nature-based entrepreneurship strategies that our cities would have taken. Raising awareness about the NBS principles. I think this is fundamental and all of our cities engaged in this. Raising awareness about the economic potential of NBS and nature-based enterprises. Again, building this awareness, building this knowledge base, talking to the different departments and other actors to create this momentum and awareness is vital. And then, some of our cities would have delivered special entrepreneurship programs that develop skills and training that were directly related to their NBS exemplar. So Poznan, it was a landscape architecture training in this whole area of developing natural playgrounds and wooded areas. We've run a number of incubator programs and accelerator programs in some of our cities, and then creating opportunities then for nature-based enterprises to deliver the NBS exemplar across the three phases. Want to mention very briefly the Connecting Nature Enterprise Platform, which is a standalone innovation of the Connecting Nature project. It's really a community for nature-based enterprises to come together, to network, to build capacity, to learn best practice and network together. I'd encourage, we now have over actually 2,000 members on the platform. Since it was launched in October 2020, it's getting a revamp at the moment and will be relaunched next year with a much more interactive user face. All of our communities are led by industry leaders, nature-based enterprises who are leaders in their field, and we encourage cities and research institutes to join up as well, because there's a lot of synergies that can be created by sort of this working together and networking together, and hopefully collaborations then in the implementation of nature-based solutions along the way. So you can see there just very briefly our global reach, but we've a huge European reach. These are our communities that we have on the platform, and the number of different users. So again, very briefly, consider entrepreneurship just as you would consider finance and business models when you're thinking about the nature-based solution and the planning, the implementation, and the stewardship. This awareness raising for both the solution and the entrepreneurship is a critical factor in terms of building support. And again, skills, motivation, collaboration of the team with the interdepartmental teams within the city, really important enabler. Pilot programs and enabling policies and networks, key enablers in supporting entrepreneurship strategies. Thank you for your attention. I'll stop there. As the project is finished, I mean, the Connecting Nature website is still live, but you will find all of our Connecting Nature resources, all of the city plans, outcomes, all on the OPLA Connecting Nature Resource Centre on the OPLA website. Thank you very much, and happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Isabel, for such an interesting overview, and also for sharing some of the critical resources that the project produce. I think this really supports transferability, learning, and scaling. Now, you've touched on some very important topics in relation to the long-term economic viability of nature-based solutions, and how, in a way, financing can be outsourced to a large extent to the private sector. I think many of the participants attending on site and also online can recognize that public funding tends to be very bureaucratic, and we know you also mentioned it in your presentation that often nature-based solutions get funded by association with specific sectors, so it's really difficult to move past this siloed approach. But I do have a question for you. We are running quite a bit out of time, but I would like to ask the audience if there are any questions. I would say one, maximum 2 questions, and if not, then we also have something for you.
Okay.
So, are there any questions from the audience before we close? No? I didn't see any questions online either. Yeah, maybe you've mentioned quite a few successful pilots and experiences you had with cities collaborating in connecting nature. One of our questions was, I mean, we all know that larger cities and metropolitan authorities tend to have larger capacities also for financing.
Yeah.
How can we make sure that smaller cities and smaller administrations with less capabilities can also promote entrepreneurship? So how do we level the playing field for cities of different sizes?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Actually, it's a really good one, because oftentimes I think the focus, as you say, is on the big on the big urban configurations, and less consideration is given to the smaller cities, who oftentimes might have smaller budgets. I think really this whole idea of pilot projects and testing and building trust and developing a proof of concept is a really important avenue for cities to engage in if they're engaging with nature-based solutions for the first time. But also, I think the scale of the project, they don't all have to be big, large, multi-million euro infrastructural projects. Things like developing pocket parks or working on the development of the community allotment, community-based nature-based solutions are often a nice way to sort of open the door and an introduction to nature-based solutions in smaller cities where they may not have engaged in this before. In terms of developing the entrepreneurship, that's where the forming of alliances really is important to identify the different players in the local ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem in the towns and cities that can work with the authority to help support the development of enterprises and enterprise strategies. So sometimes it can even be, you know, the Department of Employment or Jobs or Tourism or whatever within the local authority structure, but who've never been involved in green projects, and bringing them on board and facilitating that exploration.
Thanks. That's very clear. One last chance for questions. If not, I would say it's time to wrap up. And before we do that, I would also like to share that Anna Bruin from ICLEI mentioned in the chat that they have just launched the Hungarian nature-based solution hub that also deals a lot with topics of water management, and they would be happy to have any kind of exchanges and to really take over this conversation in different spaces. I think that could be quite fruitful. So it's time to say goodbye to our international speakers and to our audience following via Zoom. Thank you really so much for contributing to such an interesting and lively discussion. I'm not sure whether you, Barnt, have something to add, but yeah, we will close the online setup of the Policy Lab. We will go for lunch now, but we agreed with our colleagues that it would be really nice to have kind of a site visit of this space, which is an incubator that receives some funding from the European Union to really bring stakeholders together. So please stay a while longer. And thank you.
Yes, and one more word from my side. I also want to like to thank the interpreters, because without your support, we would not have been able to follow the discussions, and the same also applies to some of the people here. And also online. Always important to thank you, because this is crucial work, absolutely. Much appreciated. Indeed, thanks so much. We'll take, I would say, what shall we do? A half-hour break in total. Can we do that to win back some time for lunch and a quick tour around the building? We are a bit more flexible in the afternoon, I think, with the work groups, right? So shall we see how it goes? 40, okay, maximum 45 minutes indeed, I would say. And then, yeah, it's time also to stretch our legs and to become a bit more active and to enjoy also what nature brings us in terms of food. So thanks for being here. And we follow you for the guided tour into this brand new building, right? Please. Yes. Okay.